Awesome, we're live. Sweet. Well, here we are in Professor Spira's hosting lounge, if you will. And yeah, I'm Jake Gallen. I am a Dr. Morse trained practitioner, and I think this will be an amazing discussion to have because we've got two sides of essentially the same world of how to heal the human body, and I think there's a lot of discrepancy and a lot of people choose one side, they overlook the other, and as a Dr. Morse practitioner and that knows Morse's work in and out very deeply, I think it's a great discussion to have with Professor Spira, who knows Ehret's work so deeply, and that's his passion. And I think the overlap is greater than a lot of people think. And from clients I've had, other practitioners I talk to, usually in a lot of these groups, there's not really any wiggle room for anything else. And this like dogmatic sort of view gets me going a bit. And I've been thinking about having this discussion for a while, and I've reached out to Spira, and been so grateful for him to set this all up. And yeah, thank you so much for having me and for allowing me to use this platform, mate. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, look forward to talking with you. It's a good topic, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. So for anyone that, like, I might just give a little overview of, for anyone very new, who Dr. Robert Morse is, and based on like what I know, based on being a student and practitioner of his, and then maybe you could give an overview just quickly on like what you do and Eric's work and what you've done with that. And then we can get stuck into like the similarities and maybe some things that aren't similar but still really beneficial in both crowds, if you will. Yeah, so Robert Morse, he focuses, so both of these modalities in a way you could say is all about getting the human body to function in the best way that it can. And the way to do that is really through like the cleanest foods you can have, but there's like a process in which the body needs to go through to get to that. And Morse focuses heavily on herbs, and he focuses heavily on fruits and raw foods in that regard. And usually for like very people that don't really have much time left, when the clock is ticking, like the clients I deal with, whether you're in a wheelchair, whether you've got like been given some sort of diagnosis medically that they've deemed incurable in their eyes, these are sort of the people that I deal with and Dr. Morse deals with. So it can be a very narrow approach, but for a very good reason, for if you have like no time left. But then there's also people that want to get well that don't have such a serious issue. And I think we can get into this, why you don't need to necessarily take that like as aggressive approach. And me being quite young, and I've dived in very deep, very quickly before, and seen the ramifications of that. And then reading your book and rational fasting and going, oh, okay, that wasn't very rational. Like let us that have made the mistakes be like something for you to see, so that you don't make the same mistake, because it can be futile and very, if you don't have the education. And so yeah, in summary, like Dr. Morse, he's got a wonderful school now where I've graduated from, and because he's one man, and it's like with Ehret's work, he's no longer with us, but the books and the education that these two people have to offer is so paramount. And yeah, so Morse's, in summary, here is a focus on fruits and herbs, and specifically more so for the person that doesn't have much time left. And I think that's a good summary. So over to you, Spira.
Yeah, so and I will say, and I've studied Dr. Morse quite a bit myself, and I say I'm one of the only people that I know of that does combine Morse's. I don't talk as much publicly about the Morse methodologies, but when I'm working with clients that are really, as you said, because I only those recommendations when I feel that they're really needed for a particular client. So when you're, and a lot of people don't understand that about Morse's work. It's like, it is geared toward and comes from, or is inspired from, folks that are on their deathbeds, terminally ill, chronic illness, and then it's like, you got to jump into that right away.
The clock is ticking.
Yeah, the clock is ticking, and I always I like, one of Morse's inspirations and some older stories that he used to tell was that he had when he said after he read the Mucusless Diet Healing System by Professor Arnold Ehret, that was one of the things that really inspired him to create a clinic, because he was really inspired by Ehret talking about his sanitariums, where he would take incurable patients, bring them into a sanitarium by the hundreds and thousands, and then cure them. And so that was something that Dr. Morse particularly was really inspired by, and started his clinic in the, I believe it was the 70s, sometime in the 70s.
Yeah, it
and
was, yeah.
And started cultivating his brand of healing. But yeah, Professor Arnold Ehret, so he comes about in the late 1800s, and he's somebody who was very sick, got to a point where he was really sick, and he was kind of aristocratic. He grew up in Switzerland, Germany, that area, but he had gotten to a point where he had what was called Bright's disease, or inflammation of the kidneys, so kidney disease. And he had went to all these different doctors in Europe that all basically said that this is a terminal condition, there's nothing we can do to help you. Then he started looking into that era's naturopathic spaces, and there was some places where you would get on vegetarian diets, and this was the beginning of what we would call the back to nature renaissance of the late 1800s in Europe. So there were nudist colonies, and this sort of fruitarian consciousness was starting to hit in certain places. So he had went to a few early naturopathic people, and he said he got some improvement from changing his diet in these ways, but there was nothing that really did the job, that took it where it needed to go, until he started to fast. And the story is that he had just gotten so frustrated to the point where he was just like, I'm just going to stop eating, thinking that he's either going to die or something's going to happen. But what ended up happening was he started to feel better and better. And within a few weeks, he had healed himself of this incurable disease. And so that's where his intellect and his brilliance started to put things together, as he's like, oh, wait a minute, this is okay. And then here comes the back to nature philosophy that was all around. And so, and as a so-called Renaissance man, that's one of these ideas that there's not a whole lot of these folks around anymore, but that was a tradition. The Leonardo da Vinci, Arnold Ehret, you can just start listing the so-called Renaissance men and women who really, they drew from a lot of different places to gain understanding and be able to really, putting pieces together. Because if he was going to wait for the medical industry, which was starting, and in Europe, he was a little more well known in the medical circles in Europe, and it actually created this divide called the pro-Ehretist and the anti-Ehretist. And once he got to America, they basically blacklisted him. So that's why they weren't talking about him in academia over here. They were more so in Europe. But basically, yeah, so he starts to write, and he writes the book Rational Fasting. He's writing articles and different things, and then some of these works come together. Some things he wrote in German first, other things he wrote in English. As he in 1914, 1915, he came over to Southern California for one of those big expositions, and due to World War I, he wasn't able to go back to Europe, so he stayed in Southern California. Ended up meeting Fred Hirsch, who was terminally ill with a disease of the Achilles, and Ehret basically fasted him for like a month, and he healed. And so he became Ehret's right-hand man. The incurable Fred Hirsch lived to be 95 years old on a transition diet that a lot of people which would be controversial to a lot of people, because it was more vegetarian than you would say vegan, because he was using cottage cheese. And so, which is something that Ehret recommends for transitional purposes if you really need it. And we'll talk about some of that kind of transitional methodology. But But yeah, so he in 1920, 21, 22, he has a mysterious fall and tragically passes away. Yeah, and it's real
Yeah,
sketchy. You know,
it's
anybody that
super
when you,
sketchy.
yeah, when you look into it, it's like, yeah, this doesn't look right. But
No.
basically, you know, so but he had already created this legacy where, because in Southern California, even though the medical and the mainstream people were trying to suppress Ehret, he was getting really well known with the countercultural back to nature movement that was being started in Southern California. So it started in Europe, but a lot of those Europeans found their way down to Southern California because they heard how great the fruit was. And so then you get this, what later would become the hippie movements, or you know, these kinds of things. But that was, you know, Arnold Ehret was one of the progenitors of that. You know, he was one of the figures that people were looking up to. And when it was more about diet and back to, it was, you know, but diet was central, and then the back to nature dynamics and those things were a little bit more secondary, or was all kind of together. Decades later, by the time you get to the 60s with the so-called hippies, a lot of those principles had fallen apart, and it had degenerated into this free love, and everybody take a bunch of drugs, and the
Yeah,
dietary principles were kind of out the window. And so that,
yeah.
obviously that didn't last too much longer.
Mhm.
But yeah, so Arnold Ehret, you know, his Mucusless diet healing system, and which this is our version, my annotated version here, that basically is written, you know, about 1920, 21, and is you know, for me is a very, it's the best template for the average person that needs to go from point A to point B. Those principles that are in the book,
Mhm.
as well as the philosophies. But sometimes I tell people, when you read the book, take it all in. You don't have to believe all of the theories or all the philosophies to
Yeah,
benefit greatly from the methodologies. And after you practice for a while, oftentimes what you realize is you go back to the book and you're like, oh, that's what he was talking about.
yeah.
But yeah, so that's Arnold Ehret in a
In a nutshell,
in a,
but
in a
honest,
nutshell.
yeah, Spirit, that was awesome. I'm so glad you gave that overview of essentially how Eric went from being a really sick individual to essentially curing himself. And this is what I love about Eric and Morse at his school. He reveres Eric and has talked about that experiment where he, went on like high meat and animal protein foods, cut himself, and then
Yeah,
leaned him
after
way down.
years, yeah,
Oh,
after
yeah,
being like high fruit and fasting for
dude,
a couple
how
years,
but
comes
like
off,
the
does, yeah,
respect though, like because he went from
yeah,
such a pure way to like, I got to do this to show them the
right, yep,
difference. And Morse even says, he's done a similar experiment himself with the same results. And
hmm,
I've experienced that, like when I do work outside and you cut yourself and you're doing like a fruit or a juice cleanse, and you're like, man, that didn't even bleed. It's like sealed. Like
yeah,
what is with that?
exactly, yep,
And this is what is so important is that word transition you were talking about. And this is something I gauge with my clients too. Is like what sort of boat are you in? Are you young with a few aches and pains, or are you 45 years old with an inoperable tumor in your uterus? And then sort of looking at, okay, what can we do? How have you been before that? We
right.
can dive more into like what transition means, because some people might be like, what is transition? What is that like? Is that some woke term? No, it's not a woke term, guys. This is to do with food.
Somebody brought that up in a live stream recently. They were like, "You better be careful when you say transition. People gonna," and I was like, "No, they're not taking that word from us.
No,
I've
I
been
know.
pushing that word for 21 years, and but that's
Yeah.
funny that we even have to think about that."
That's why it's because of your live stream. That's why I had to say it, because I'm like, just there's going to be someone just to clarify. This is
Yeah,
transitioning food from
yeah,
heavy junk food to cleaner food, and why that's important.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I just wanted to reiterate over the top as well of those pioneers that you're talking about, like the Da Vinci's, if you will. I think another one that's present today who's sort of gone a bit quiet was John Rose. Like, I felt he's someone that's done a lot of self-testing and it's like, I think it's Aristotle's quote, there's no better fact than a fact experienced from your own life. So many people just go and they'll listen to one person without actually reading a book or reading up and doing the research on it. And you see these YouTubers making videos, and I have people messaging me, asking me about things. I'm doing this, and I'm like, what, you're doing a juice cleanse from eating just a Western diet? I would not be doing that. And then I can't control what they do. But this is where it's so important to listen to a discussion like this or read your book, because that, honestly, I've read both, and your revised version is so vital. And I've got people that know virtually nothing that have read it and go, oh yeah, I can digest this. This is that aren't even, they're in those hippie groups of like mushrooms and they're lost somewhere. The diet thing is completely lost out of their awareness. And it's so digestible. And so, yeah, like Morse himself, like he heavily went into the world of like tissue regeneration. I would say is his specialty. Like, that's the focus. And he openly states that his focus is, if you have a huge tumor hanging off your neck, are you in a wheelchair, are you if you had a head-on car crash injury, these sort of severe things, and seeing how literally in a matter of months in some cases for people can get out of a wheelchair or get a lot more mobility, where they had like full spine separation in that space of time. And that's where I think a cool question is, just it leads back to what Ehret did with those experiments of eating high protein foods, if you will, to higher water energy, sun kitchen foods, if you will, from nature, and how the healing was so much faster, and what that can look like in an individual that maybe doesn't have a spinal injury, and sort of like what can they do as a balance to still be really healthy without having to do, I don't know, 100% grapes, for example.
Yeah. So with Ehret, he presents a system. And so one thing that I've noticed is sometimes we'll get folks coming from raw foods community, or if they had maybe read Hotima first or a number of other books that are kind of this fruitarian concept, then they come to the Mucusless diet, or they come to rational fasting. Oftentimes they won't even read the Mucusless diet. They'll go straight to rational fasting. And you study Ehret's work. Rational fasting and that content was written before the Mucusless diet healing system, for the most part, most of it. And even though there's a couple parts that reference the Mucusless diet, I think those were things that were added later in a couple of those articles. But there's some of the core material that you notice, the further back you go with Ehret, the more aggressive his recommendations, the more aggressive he is in terms of talking about humans, we're fruit eaters, and we need to, get to eating fruit sooner than later, and fasting. A lot of those recommendations are a little more intense than there's years that he went of working with people in the sanitariums before he started really writing the Mucusless diet, transition diet methodology. And that's why I kind of look at the Mucusless diet healing system, the whole system, as being the crowning opus of everything he created, because it maintains that the principles that humans were frugivores, that is what we are, but we've degenerated ourselves, put ourselves in such a situation of generation after generation after generation of wrong eating, that this thing is not going to be turned around overnight. We have to fundamentally transform our blood and just totally transform our body to start to get back to that ancestral lifestyle and the ancestral diet. And so that transition methodology, and to me, that's one of the game changers. Is one of the things that's really different from Ehret and most everybody else's I've seen, because that transition methodology can really be applied to almost anything, because it's very natural. I always like to look at, because people ask me, well, how long does a transition take? And those of us that practice the mucusless diet. And notice I said practice the mucusless diet. That's kind of how we look at it. We're not, foodists, if it's like a raw foodist or a veganist or whatever. It's like we practice the mucusless diet healing system, which means there's ups and downs. There's periods of time. So you visit the all fruit periods when your body needs it. You visit, this recommends short-term fasting, short-term liquid fasting periods, as opposed to these really long periods, so that you gain a mastery. If you do, you fast for 24 hours once a week, several months in, you're going to really start to learn how your body gets into and out of a fast well. Because a lot of these people that go and try to do these long fasts, they break it with abominable things because they don't know how to break their fast. They get excited because they feel so good, and it becomes this kind of false delusion where it's like, yeah, you can get into a fast, not a big deal. Can you break the fast? That's the if you can go fast for 40 days. Can you break it well? And then can you remain mucus free for an adequate period of time in comparison to how long you fasted? And so, from a methodological standpoint, we're going from wherever somebody's diet is, and we kind of analyze it, and we look at the mucus content, how well do the things that they're eating eliminate. We always use the word elimination. And so we're looking, and this is where some folks would disagree with us that are the real hardcore raw foodists. And we say, I would rather see somebody eat mucus-free cooked foods like some baked zucchini or some stewed kale. I would rather see them eat that with a big raw salad than to have a big raw salad with 2 or 3 avocados on it. And they get mad at me because they want their avocados. And I don't say you can't have that. I'm just saying, as you get cleaner, you're probably not going to want that, because you'll notice how slimy that stuff really is. But so that's some of the a brief introduction to that concept. But that's where we always end up referring people to the book. Like, we got to really read those sections, the transition diet sections, and don't ignore those, because when the deeper you get into really looking at those methodologies, and so one of the things that surprises people is Ehret, in his transition recommendations, so if he takes somebody off the street that's in a really bad condition, he doesn't put them on raw fruit for a month. You're eating cooked fruit for a month. If you really are using those principles. A lot of people miss that. They miss the sophistication of his transition methodology, because he brings you in, he'll put you on vegetables, a vegetable meal in the afternoon, and cooked fruit in the evening for a couple weeks. And then in the 3rd and 4th week, switch it around. So now you got cooked fruit in the afternoon, vegetable meal in the evening. Then in month 2, now we're going to give you a raw fruit meal and a vegetable meal, and so on and so forth. And but so many people miss that. They miss that sophistication of hitting your body with from these different angles. Because yes, eventually you get to a point where you can do fruit in the afternoon. You do the 2 meal a day standard sanitarium diet, I call it, fruit in the afternoon, vegetable meal in the evening, or fruit in the afternoon, fruit in the evening, or whatever. I mean, you can get to that, but when you take your body through those different looks, those different angles, then it really serves to help eliminate a lot. And so what I find myself doing oftentimes is, even with clients that are a little more, having a little more problems, if they're not immediately on their deathbed, I'll get them transitioning. I like to see people transition for a couple weeks at least before getting into the herbs. So we want to try to, if we can use the food, we want to use the food as much as possible. And so we'll get them transitioning, and then get into, when we're talking, the people with endocrine gland issues, Dr. Morse all day. You know, I love his methodology.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's what's perfect. And I always break it down where, because people sometimes want to know why do the herbs even work? And I have a way of just looking at things and breaking things down real simplistic and non-scientific. But
same with me.
You know, I'm like, so the herbs, when they're at their best, they're generally doing one of two things. They're helping you eliminate something. They're causing elimination, whether it's, lymphatic movement, or if they can target a particular gland and help it to excrete, and eliminate waste. So it's either doing that or it's stimulating. So if it's in a case where you got someone with the hypothyroid and you give them the thyroid formula, then that causes, it's able to get in there and stimulate those tissues, the tissues that make up that gland, and or the adrenals or whatever you're dealing with. And because that blows people's mind. And I know you've probably seen that when people's endocrine glands turn back on, and then they give you that call like, I'm really hot, and I'm like, good. Where they
thyroid's working now.
The thyroid, you just turned on, and like, man, I'm super hot and I'm a little jittery, and I'm like, good, lay off. Now lay it back, or transition off, or take a break from the herb.
Exactly. That's huge though, because a lot of people, I have a friend who said, I've been following Morse's method and I've been on herbs for about 15 years. And I'm just like, no, you don't know what you're doing. I said, no, like these herbs, Morse will have you on a program and he'll train us to do this chopping and changing using different herbs coming from different angles, just like with the food.
Right.
But like really no more than 6 months, unless you're in a serious situation. Usually 3 is like the median sort of area. And as the weeks and months go by, that's when the diet becomes leaner and leaner. And it's funny, just the similarity there between the two, the overlap of how Ehret approaches and how you'll approach a client that's just come from a standard American or standard Western diet, and like using the cooked fruits. Like that is a huge thing that we use, especially fruits can be really aggressive. If you've got chronic stomach problems, one of the best things is like applesauce or cooked apple. It's like if you went and did grape juice or grapes or oranges, you could vomit and just continually vomit back.
Right.
You can have people with that sort of they can't handle the fruits yet. It's like, and I've other practitioner friends who go, why isn't this working? And I said, dude, you got to do some greens or green juice or something to alkalinize and calm that. They're much slower. Fruits are like, let's go, and it's just hits you.
Exactly.
And it's funny, the similarity between what you just described there with that diet coming from different angles over the weeks and the months virtually matches almost step by step Dr. Morse's ultimate detox program. He has them as PDFs people can use. He's got so much free resource information so that you can learn through his videos and watch. And you see that influence from Ehret. You see that influence of, a lot of these like one of the medium detox options really is like salad with sweet potato or cooked mucusless vegetable. There's never a starchy vegetable in there.
Right.
And when I see people that, jump on that, I've just had, and I've made this mistake when I've craved like high fats, you just go down this road and I'm like, man, I'd feel way better if I just had a baked sweet potato or a love baked zucchini or steamed zucchini. And you're way better off doing that. And this is where a lot, as you said, those hardcore raw foodies and will get like turn their nose up kind of thing. But it's like they don't understand that the body is at a very delicate stage. It's actually at a stage where you got to be the most careful when you have time. And this is where, like, if we just put aside for a second that these other clients that I often deal with and Morse deals with, these are the people that, again, are in critical situations that like I have a family member now who's got 3 blocked arteries in the heart and he doesn't want to go for this open heart surgery. And I've got herbs and ways that I need to do this. And yeah, it's a bit choppy. It's like a bit bumpy waves, but I saw him last week. He was driving again. He was like, had energy back. And it's like, yeah, but mate, his we can't be taking baby steps here, but this is a separate, we need to get that and put that here. And then we need to put the other people that haven't got that critical situation. And
Yeah.
how do we behave this way? And I think this is where people just get this blurred line and they go, Morse didn't say that. Ehret didn't say that. And then I listen to what you talk about. And I'm like, man, there's so much overlap that people are just not getting. And
Yeah. And I've always found that weird too, where people have so much trouble seeing that and getting,
it blows my mind, man.
it's just because at the end of the day, I look at it, it's just good old fashioned naturopathy, but so few people they've deviated so much. That's when I saw Dr. Morse. I'm like, well, that's real naturopathy. Arnold Ehret, real naturopathy. There was so, I disagree with a lot of some of the natural hygienists. I'd go through reading their books, and I'm like, they're going in some weird directions and things. And but yeah, when I find somebody that's really keyed into real naturopathy, then makes me happy, because it works, and it's because it's not just you can heal whatever can be healed. You could do it, and then then you can have some longevity where you don't fall off and just because then that is a problem I see, where some people they'll heal themselves of something, but then if they haven't read the Mucusless diet book, they'll go back to eating the way that they used to eat, because they don't know that there's a middle ground. There's a better, where you can be satiated and satisfied and eat, you can eat food and be satisfied and not go all the way back to whatever, got you in this condition in the first place.
Yeah. And something I explain to even friends that have made this mistake plenty of times is, let's say you've been on a because I think when I deal with my clients, I see it as Dr. Morse meets Ehret, and it just like weaves. And the success I've seen, like one of my clients is, for example, I did a video testimonial. In 5.5 months, she went from having alopecia, which is like patchy baldness of the scalp, to almost 100% full hair regrowth. That she'd already been practicing the Mucusless diet healing system. She had done like keto, carnivore, then found your book, then found me, and then hybrided that, went on the herb protocol for about 2 to 3 months, and then went off. And man, like seeing the hair regrowth, and she's showing the hair, it's like, there we go. It's like, it's a beautiful relationship of traditional naturopathy. And I think Morse is changing that term for his doctorate degree that he's having through his school, hopefully this year, is it's real naturopathy. It's not this watered down food pyramid, high protein stuff. Because that's like Morse, anytime there's nuts involved, Morse is like, do not touch them, like unless you pair it with like dried fruit or something.
Yeah.
Like, otherwise don't get in that.
Which is the Ehret principle.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and I remember you've talked about that in your videos over the years of, when you were still eating those in higher amounts, you would smash them with dried fruit. And I've got little pins in my, like little slips in my Mucusless diet book on all the areas. So like if I do feel something coming up, and I'm like, man, I might be pushing a little bit too hard here. What can I do? Like, okay, oh, well, that grated carrot with grated apple and raisins, or the baked banana surprise or something. Is a great thing to do. So, and I took a note here because this is something that it just shows the workings of the system for both systems, that is found it's the foundation of it is on diet, and something that I'm trained in, and hopefully every other practitioner of Morse understands, is don't just get like 50 million different herb things and then don't focus on, and then sort of half do the diet or half do the transition, because this is where people get lost and they see no result. Like if you're someone if you're someone thinking you're doing the transition, the Mucusless diet transition, but you're actually not, but you've told yourself you are, it's like, are you actually being honest with yourself doing the transition? Have you actually paired that correctly? Or like that friend who's been doing the herbs for like 15 years, it's like you were doing maybe one formula, and Morse has shown how you can't just focus on one area. Oh, I'm just going to do just this for it today. And it's like you do the program for a period of time, you get focused on that, and then you're done, and then you sustain afterwards.
Right.
And I wanted to move on to this part on, because both Ehret and Morse share the view, and I'm not going to say it's fact because it's going to trigger a lot of people, but I think it's pretty unanimous that we share the highest physiology with fruitarians, with frugivores.
Yeah.
But can we be that? Can we be that now? Once we've transitioned, can we live at that higher frequency? Morse doesn't think we can. I would agree with him in many senses that this world isn't necessarily ready for a fruitarian way of living if people transition themselves to be able to sustain that. But the fact is, that is our species in terms of the closest genetic match we have based on Western data, like National Geographic says that we've got, I think, 98% with the chimpanzee, and that's their statistics. So using their numbers on that, how can we get to that? And that's where using a transition methodology, if you have time, is critical and is the most, as you said, for the most common man and woman to just get on that. And then you do those periods of, I'm going to do the juice window. I'm going to do just the fruit window. I'm going to, after you've got your body like acclimated, if you will, to this way of eating, not just fruit. And then I'm having peanut butter on toast with a vegan cheeseburger or something.
Yeah,
and I did that years ago, and it's just, you don't get nowhere. Because anyone that knows a bit about my story, my teeth were eroding internally, and no dentist could tell me why my teeth were eroding from the inside out. I said, if it's the sugar in the fruit that's killing my teeth, why is it internal?
Right.
And after going through Morse's school, I was like, well, it's interstitial, it's in the cells, it's the lymphatic system not moving. Right. I then knew I needed to change that fast. I was an avid coffee drinker too, so it's like there's a lot that needed to change there, man. So I knew that I needed to get this area drained. Right. And I'd already been studying your work and Morse's work, but I hadn't fully done it. So this is where getting focused and getting like just the understanding. I think the best thing that I'm hoping people get from this discussion is just a deeper understanding of what you can do to get well. Because there's so many podcasts and videos of people just talking. I did 90 days juice. I did 140 days juice. And then someone's going to watch that and then go, oh, I'm going to do it. And then next thing, it's like futile, or it just knocked the hat. They don't know what they're doing. So anyway, I wanted to get into another sort of what I would say is, I think, a definite confusion in the Morse world, and that would be enemas and colonics. Firstly, just off the bat, Morse is not as higher recommend. He doesn't highly recommend enemas like Ehret does. But this is where I want to have this discussion. He doesn't dislike them. He doesn't say do not do them. I have people in practitioner groups that have said to me they'll kick me out of the group because I made that recommendation. And I said, no, that person literally has done the fruits and the herbs and they still aren't eliminating. You need to get that out. Go get a colonical, do your daily lemon juice enemas, and chuck a little tea if you need to in there. Like, do what you got. Like, and they don't see that. So I think, could you maybe elaborate on the importance of that from an Arnold Ehret perspective? And I can come in with, Morse's, angle on that too, because I think it's super important.
So I'll answer the first question, which was about the transitioning to fruitarian existence.
Sure, yeah.
As humans. So my thoughts on that is part of what we, when you can raise your consciousness to the certain level, what we should be doing is getting ourselves as clean as we can and then reproduce. And we raise the next generation. We of course, we're going to continue to try to get ourselves as clean as we can, but we get clean, have children, we're raising them to be clean. Now, what we're working on is a whole community of people doing that at the same time. And all of our children can, if they decide to get together and then have more children, once we start talking generationally, when you can talk about your children's children's children, 2 or 3 generations deep of pure transition, hardcore transition dieting, and because with each generation, instead of degenerating, which is what we've been experiencing, a carbon copy, a copy of a copy, which gets worse and worse every time, we're going to, for the first time in a long time in human history, we'll start having children that are way better than the parents, that are
Mm-hmm.
way healthier, that are so much further removed from the experience of disease,
Mm-hmm.
removed from the kind of pain and suffering that we have defined as normality. So for me, and this is inspired by or in some of Ehret's philosophies, we just take it and we we're the only ones really talk about it, on that level, in terms of, is he uses the word eugenics, which I explain in the book. It has nothing to do with Hitler or the American eugenics programs. He was using the word as it was originally discussed, which was more of a philosophical, the word gen, which is in Genesis, and all these words that have gen in it, genetics and all that kind of stuff, which is born or to rise up, and so that is something where I try to get people to think like that, real long term, because what happens oftentimes in these naturopathic circles or the natural health world is people get real into themselves to the point where they want it to be all about them. So like, I want to be fruitarian, I want to be breatharian, I want to do a 40-day fast, me, I, as opposed to, let me just get myself as clean as I can, so that I can try to bring in some humans that are better than me, that are cleaner than me, and I will help them get even cleaner, so that's how we perpetuate and clean up humanity, potentially, because I would love to see us transmute and evolve into a higher species. We can maybe call it Homo spiritus instead of Homo sapiens. But so as far as that goes, that's kind of my thing with that. Some people are physiologically gifted, so you're going to have a handful of people that are able, that's easier for them than others. That's physiological. That's has to do with the history of their stomach, and there is the mind and spirit aspect to that too. But you really got to watch out for that, because sometimes the people that are talking about that they are eating nothing but fruit, they haven't done it for 20 years yet, so it's not to take nothing away from them, but I'm and this is what me and my friend brother Air always talk about, like we're looking for those long periods of times. We've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years.
Exactly.
For that long, because what ends up happening, which has happened time and time again, there was a guy that had got some notoriety of he had came out saying he was a breatharian. Then he ended up going back to cook food, or I think I don't know exactly his whole story, but he had went back to eating stuff. And then he was trying to explain to people, like, okay, look, it's really about transition. There's other stuff. It's like people like these titles and all this stuff, but that's, at the end of the day, that stuff doesn't mean it really doesn't mean anything. It's like, that's how I'm starting to really measure things, is can you create something better than yourself? Are you clean enough and do you have enough knowledge to actually create another human that's cleaner than you? Because that's going to give you the best chance. If people are interested in longevity, like, that's going to give you the best chance in terms of your bloodline. And then, you're on this path, then, you can, let's see how long we can go. We just have to understand where we're coming from, where we're as far as we ate Big Macs, we ate, like we ate steak and eggs and stuff, so we're, we got a lot of work to do to rectify those wrongs. But I think we can do a lot to get rid of that. I call it physiological karma. We can remove that physiological karma as much as we can, and then perpetuate the bloodline.
I just wanted to add on to that real quick before you go on to the next. That's critical. A huge part of, and Morse doesn't discuss this much on his videos. He still does now in this day and age because of the era we live in, what's going on the planet. But it's about getting yourself clean so your offspring are healthy, and like rebuilding your gene strength so that you can have and it's not just about you, like you were saying, because we do live in an age where everything is so egocentric and people focus heavily on themselves, and that's why you see these hippie movements is all like me, mushroom trip, whatever. And this is where people get lost. And if you look and see the bigger picture of, okay, how much can I handle? How can I get myself strong? So as you said, that generational change and burning off that physiological karma generation by generation, so that to even have a discussion of, hey, oh, I'm going to go to the cafe with my friends and they're going to have steak and whatever, that wouldn't even be part of like the vocabulary. Right. And I think this is huge because a huge part of Morse's teachings, which no one really know too much, I'm sure you do, like he sort of interjects it into his videos, but at his school, man, like level 1 is the spirituality karma side of things, the karma of food, the karma of what we've done, the karma of the situation we're in, like as an individual being in a wheelchair, the karma of that, and then moving through that through the change of diet and your higher awareness. This is where you got to sort of gauge the client and the person you're dealing with, but at the end of the day, that's where you got to get to, because if you can't square with that and process those other things, you're gonna constantly be all over the shop. But I just wanted to note that because Morse does heavily like encourage both mother and father to get yourselves clean. Don't have your kids when you are like sick. Or you're going to have, like, my appendix blew up when I was 15 months old because my mom had, she ate like candy and stuff when she was pregnant with me and had an abusive relationship. So all of that went into the fetus. I should have died like 3 times. That didn't happen. And it's like, so living without an appendix, and it's like, well, that appendix essentially was the strength of probably a average, maybe 80-year-old now, like of an average eater. It's like that weak. It's like, that doesn't have to be that way. We can see that difference by, as you said, looking at the bigger picture of how are we going to build humanity to generationally get stronger and not degrade. So yeah, that was awesome that you went into that, because that's so critical.
Yeah. And so on the enemas, Dr. Morse, it's just as you said, he's kind of not, he's really kind of neutral on them. If you really listen to him, but he's not, for him, it's a tool. We're more liberal with it. It's almost, the herbs for me is a tool. I'm not going to automatically recommend it to everybody unless you really need it. The enemas are recommended to most everybody unless they have a serious issue that there's only a couple. For us, there's really only a couple of reasons that we would have somebody not get into the enemas, and we're particularly doing lemon juice and distilled water enemas.
Not coffee enemas, guys. Not coffee enemas.
No coffee. No coffee enemas.
Get that through.
You get that on the record, right?
I think I also, just a quick note, I think that when Morse does refer to enemas, when I've seen him being asked questions, because I do it's all online now, but the people have asked questions about that, I think he often does actually refer to the stimulation of acidic enemas. Like he talks about the gut being overstimulated and using enemas that can overstimulate. But I'm like, I don't see lemon juice doing that. I see coffee doing that. And I think because the craze is coffee, I stopped drinking coffee, but I now do coffee enemas. And it's like, of course you're going to feel great because you're stimulating that area so much with that coffee. That's not where the healing's at. That's the wrong focus. Just wanted to state that for the record, that I also think Morse may be referring heavily more so to coffee enemas than the Arnold Ehret approach.
Because so Ehret recommended the water enema, so that if there is something that our community brought to the table and championed, it would be to add the lemon to the enemas. We're not the first to ever write about it, or but for us, that was a game changer when we started to, and years ago, and I don't know where all the old videos are. If you know where some of the old archives, since YouTube banned them and got rid of, as I used to love the raw figs, and I don't know if they're going to be able to fix that now. But
there's a recent update that I can talk about.
Okay, cool.
They've amended that because they've pretty much recreated raw figs on the website with that search thing. You can type in it, it comes up with anything on the database.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
beautiful. Yeah.
brilliant. You can find anything. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, no, because I've used that for years. I love that raw figs. But yeah, it's the I had years ago, I wrote some questions. We're talking 2011 or something like that, like real or pretty early on in Dr. Morse's old channel. I had wrote some things. He had even at one point, because he knew I was into Ehret, and I'd ask him some questions. I was talking to him about Arnold Ehret, and then in the next video, he grabbed it was what's his name? His name is escaping me, but it was an Arnold Ehret Arnold Ehret Club card that he had from Bernard Jensen.
Not Jensen, the iridology guy.
Jensen gave him this card, and he showed it on the camera.
This guy.
Yeah.
This guy.
yeah. And I knew him from the tissue management, the bowel management book, which I got into. And then of course, and then that's a weird case study, because Jensen, his diet was like horrible, and he ended up having
he got himself.
It's a weird kind of situation where you would know you have all this information, mucus diet, all this stuff.
Astounding.
It was weird, but yeah. So there was one time I mentioned that I was like, we do, a lot of us do regular lemon juice and distilled water enemas, and I kind of and he kind of was like, he's like, oh, okay, and I was like, and I know where your position on that, but I will say that lemon juice has the ability to get into the interstitial, it's got
astringent.
It's got that astringent property on the walls of the colon, and you're getting in there. But that's really kind of what we really notice with that. When you get into the lemon, it is a way to, if you have any cravings of foods that you're not supposed to eat, any meat, dairy, whatever cravings come up, because that's the one thing, if you're somebody that had to get right, you're on your deathbed, or real, chronic kidneys or whatever, and you had to get hardcore into the fruit and the herbs immediately, then I still recommend to come back to the mucus-free transition diet, because you missed out on your body going through that transition. Because I've seen people time and time again in that type of circumstance end up, they feel great for a while, and they're getting healed. But then once you get to that baseline, all of a sudden, all these cravings for foods that you haven't eaten in a long time start coming out of nowhere, and they don't know how to handle it. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
And
I just want to note something there. This is why on like a Morse protocol, for those that are wondering, Morse will always have, for like the first month of herbs, some sort of parasite herbal formula.
Right.
And I've seen a client, literally, they were like heavy fish eaters, two of them, and one of them got they were eliminating really well. They're on like Morse's GI formulas. There's two. There's the GI Broom and the GI Renew, which are like they're essentially like, I could see them as almost like a topic, like a mouth taking enema in a way, because they help flush and get that GI tract moving. But this is something very critical that I've seen practitioners be like, I'm not going to use the enema because blah blah blah. When you stop eliminating because you've made a massive kill, if you will, and you've got these worms and old impactions, and they re-lodge, and then you get that reabsorption, how dangerous that is. It's like, you need to go get a high irrigation enema or colonic right now, because it could potentially be fatal in a very serious situation. You don't know what kind of waste little clump there is moved and then impacted again. So this is where the herbs were moving out, the food was moving out, but then maybe they had a constriction in part of the GI tract where it narrowed down and it blocked. Then that's where you have to come out the other end with, you know, the lemon juice enema and get that out, or go, better yet, probably in that situation, a colonic, and then do the enemas to get the residual. So this is a good example of where, you know, from my view, where you see that because I'll never just be like, well, one man said one thing, therefore I'll forever just listen to that one thing. You're like, I'm always looking at what works. And I think Morse
Yeah.
encourages that for everyone too, is any practitioners or people training with Morse or doing your courses and so on, is like, we see what works. And these two, like, they hold each other's hand when you use them correctly. Like you said, when you choose to use herbs for the endocrine glands with your clients, and you see like Morse's training on that. And, you know, like my understanding of the human body now is insane due to the fact of understanding endocrinology, where I can't see it any differently now. It's like I've reprogrammed
and it's so sad when you see how far off endocrinologists in the medical field are, where it's scary.
And the amount that they charge, like, to see an endocrinologist, like they think the parathyroid glands are useless. They see no use in them. They don't know any. And that's the thing, is like this. I'm currently finishing the iridology section at the school, and there's so much that could be done into the eyes. There could be so much that could be done into the endocrine glands, more so. Like because there's no money in that. There's no there's no reason for us to put research there. And this is where it's up to us with experiment and just looking and using observation and seeing with clients. And that's why I'm trying to get as much document with client testimonials with this way of doing things. So that speaks for itself, right? Yeah. So I think we've covered anything else you wanted to add on the enemas, but I think that's pretty, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, we incorporate them more liberally into the lifestyle itself. So basically, unless you have chronic adrenal insufficiencies, then you should be fine doing the enemas, you know. And we've never had, some people are scared, well, am I going to have to rely on them or so? Again, it's look at the system. We don't tell people to do an enema before you've had a natural bowel movement.
Yeah,
exactly. We always have a natural. If you're not having natural bowel movements, then we get into, the first place we go is looking at what type of food you're eating, what type of fruit, what kind of combination, and maybe give you something that we know is going to help move your bowels a little better. And then, you know, then the herbs, you know, then we get into one of the herbal formulas to help with the bowels. Cause, you know, that was one of Ehret's formulas, where he's had his so-called inner clean formula, which was basically stomach and bowel. I know it's called something different now, but it was stomach and bowel 2 and 3. Inner clean was right in between 2 and 3 in terms of its you know,
of Morse's ones, you mean? Like
of Morse's. It's what's it called now?
I think they've recently made an update.
What's it called? GI Renew now?
I still call it. I think Morse still calls it GI Renew. I'll still always call it GI Renew. I think it's called like GI Daily or something.
Well, that's even changed again, because what I'm saying, when I was taking it, it was called Stomach and Bowel Formula 1 through 5.
A few years, yes, it was Stomach and Bowel, and they changed that a few years ago, and then it's changed again.
Okay, so it's it keeps changing. But because I still just call it Stomach and Bowel. I like some of those old formulas. And there was one, man, I'm still, and I wrote that down somewhere. He responded to it years ago, because it was called Lungs 2, I think. And it was probably it was always recommended for people that had cancers and stuff. It was probably the most aggressive lymphatic mover that he had at that time. And I loved that formula. My body loved it. I could crush that formula. And but he took it off because he said it was too aggressive. It was, people were, I guess they were getting, it was too aggressive on him or something. But then I was like, man, I wish I'd have bought several bottles of that before you took it off the market.
Because they've still got 3 lung, or I think it's called the 3 herb. It's like the 3.
Well, that's the 3 lung tea, but that's different. That's way
different. But they got the 3 lung tincture, which acts as, often we use it as a lymphatic formula, because it's got some, especially for lung problems. But now I've got, I think it's lymphatic 4, which is, I think, the most aggressive one
that he has.
And but he has, unfortunately, because I think there have been some people, again, that just do silly things and they don't listen. But that's like, the most gnarly herbs to be careful with is lymphatic herbs at the end of the day. All the other ones are pretty, very hard for you to have a trouble with them.
So,
Those,
well,
yeah,
what's interesting for me, because it's almost like a thing where I think the cleaner you are, certain herbs are not going to affect you as much. But it depends if it's a herb. Like I said, I kind of divide it into it's either helping to clean or it's helping to stimulate glands. And if it's a cleansing one and you're not too filthy, you can actually handle quite a bit of those herbs. And that's why I felt like I was able to, like, I can go through lymphatic herbs and I really don't have any kind of bad, symptoms. Now, I would never recommend what I would take to my clients or somebody else because it'd be way too potent. But it changes when you're talking about the endocrine herbs to the point where once because I went through the period where I was rebuilding my endocrine system. Once it was rebuilt, I can't take any endocrine herbs. It's I'm too sensitive to, like, it throws everything off, and my body's just like, you don't need these. What are you doing? Stop.
You've saying something so important, because Jessica, who's the main counselor, like, because Morse doesn't really see people anymore, he's pretty much trained her to be the main counselor, and she used an analogy for the herbs, which is exactly why I think you're experiencing that. Is you've already rebuilt those endocrine glands. So this is why anyone listening that goes, I've been on these herbs for years and whatever, and it's like, when you do this system correctly and you get the endocrinology built back up, they are now strong again, because what the herbs have done is they're essentially trainers or teachers of the glands. They're like, Morse uses the term of, like, everything in your body is like, there's two fluids and there's a bunch of cells. So your glands are those cells, and the fact is these herbs are just specific to those glands. They love that tissue. So they're there to, like, clean and strengthen. So if you have a underactive thyroid, they're going to rebuild and invigorate that thyroid gland. And then once that is done, well, it's like, I know what I'm doing. It's like having a math tutor, and then going, I don't need the math tutor anymore. I know how to do the equations. It's going to be annoying having you in my ear telling me how to. And I think that's why you see, like, once the training wheels have been taken off, if you will, they're like, the herbs are like little training wheels again of, like, okay, let's train you back up. Let's get you up to speed, and then take them off. And maybe if you were in a situation where there's like a chemical spill or something, you could feel your endocrinology being a bit suppressed, you might get on an endocrine gland formula just for a month or something.
Like, you can do a little taste.
And you're like, man, that was rough. We had some weird weather systems happening here and some crazy stuff in the air. I might get on that just for the, because there's always going to be something. But you're absolutely right. Like, when for like a formula, what I can handle is not what, a client that's just started can handle. And for example, we won't even use really lymphatic formulas for the first month. That's usually never, because if you start moving lymph and your kidneys aren't open, you can see swelling. And if you have tumors, like, that's a no-no. You just do not want to mess with that, because the gates are closed and you get it builds, and edema just builds, and you don't want that. You want to get the gates open. And so it's so cool you said that, though, because the cleaner you become, you can take these very fast moving herbs, or like handle more lemon, handle more these lemon meals, these high astringents, without, and that's because of that cleaning part, that cleaning cycle, that transition cycle, where there's less toxic waste that is being stirred up and moved, that can make you feel super down. But just from a Morse practitioner point of view, something, and I'm sure that maybe with clients you have too, that people are going to have those ups and downs, usually at the beginning in terms of energy, because the endocrine glands, especially if someone's been addicted to coffee, I see that all the time. They usually crash, and these bit of licorice root kicks them up a bit if they don't have high blood pressure, and these sort of things can be used, and they go, oh, okay, I feel actually quite good now, because they stimulate the adrenal glands a little without it like wrecking them like coffee would. But yeah, anyway, I digress a bit. I was really glad you pointed that out, though, because that's a super, super cool area where you notice that the body's now healed. I don't need that anymore.
Like because what you can't do, which is kind of what and this was years ago when I was doing all this, but what I tried to do, because you're thinking like, oh wow, man, I'm feeling better and better. Then you want to take it like an energy drink or something, like, oh, can I get even more? And then your body's like, no, that's not how this works. This is not an energy drink.
Yeah.
You need to stop taking these herbs. You're good.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And but no, I love the quote of Morse, the genetic remembering of cells.
Yeah. Oh man, it's one of the best. It's literally because the way he uses it, because I am the same. Like we still have some intellectual stuff at the school, but it's minimal because it's Morse teaching it. Because he's not a fan of intellectualism, really, as you probably well know. And it's all simplistic truths that we observe and that we are seeing happen in nature, and that's really what true naturopathy is. Like, this is what we see. You have mucus forming foods, high protein, degrades like these simple pillars. And one of the things with explaining the cells is they just start to forget. They just become like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, I kind of know what I'm doing. I don't really know what I'm doing. Okay, I've completely forgot what I'm doing. Now the function's gone. And then it's like, okay, the herbs come back in. Oh, that's what I meant to be doing. Okay, yeah, that's better. Okay, cool. It's like the tutoring part. Okay, well, you know what to do now. Okay, cool. You good to go? Sweet. See ya. You don't need me anymore.
Right.
And it's a fun because kids, kids go to the school like as well. It's just, these things kids can understand because it's appealing. I say it's appealing to what you already intrinsically know. The same way animals just will go to those things. They won't eat when they're sick. They'll fast. They will do these things that you would normally otherwise have that awareness already just at the forefront of your being, but it's sort of been heavily degraded. I wanted to just quickly take a note on the only people because Morse will say people can not have regular bowel movements without enemas. And I haven't experienced that. And I know that you haven't, and clients you haven't experienced that. And I've been on forums, and the only people I've seen that have experienced this reliance on enemas is coffee. It's the only one I've seen. Because of that overstimulation. I've seen, that's the only one I can see based on what I've
and for that historical context, because I had analyzed that and just kind of seeing how Dr. Morse, because like I said, it was, I don't know if that was ever the first time he ever heard of it, but I mean, he kind of responded when we talked about lemon enemas. When I wrote him, he kind of like, oh, like he hadn't really thought of that or worked with that. But since he came up in the 70s where, Gerson was all the rage, and you had your carrot juice era and the coffee enema era. And so I understand where he's coming from because of seeing all of that and seeing how people that would just overdo it, just so many coffee to the point where now you're not addicted. It's not that you're addicted to the enema, you're addicted to the caffeine and the coffee, because that's not something that you need to be using for an enema. But yeah, so I understand where if he went through the 70s and in the 80s, just he went through those decades where it was just so rampant, and that coffee as a stimulant, as a drug, it's just overwhelming the adrenal glands. And so he's looking at like, kind of almost blaming enema for the adrenal insufficiency. And it's like, well, no, that I'm looking at the coffee and saying, nah, that because you can drink the coffee and have those same degrading of your adrenal glands. And so, but like I said, that is the one case. If somebody has really, really bad adrenal fatigue kind of case, or the endocrine gland is really, really compromised, we're going to transition them into enemas slowly. We won't just come and say, okay, go do a bunch of enemas. It's like, no, maybe you need to not do an enema for a week or two, or do an enema once a week, and really work with the herbs, really work with the transitional methodology. As the endocrine system starts to get back online, you can increase the enema frequency, because now without harming the adrenals at all, because the way I conceive of it is when you have a vehicle battery. So if you look at those glands as a battery, the adrenal glands as a battery in a car, is when the battery starts to really die, where the voltage gets lower and lower, that where it needs that jump start. Eventually, it'll be too low for even a jump start to really help it, because you could jump it and get the car or the vehicle to turn on, but the battery is too low. It's the battery can no longer charge. So when you bring the herbs in and you bring the fruit and the detox and that methodology, you got to get the adrenals to a certain level. You get them up to a certain space where they are able to recharge, and they eventually recharge on their own without the herbs. But they get to that point where they're recharging, and once they're as you get higher up into that level of just being able to recharge itself, then you don't have to worry about the enemas. There's not going to be a problem where you'll any kind of fatigue issues as a result, or any of that kind of stuff. Find that going away. And that's more, that takes longer to explain, and it's kind of gets into the weeds of some of that stuff. But that's I've definitely seen that. So there is a time when I'll tell somebody, lay off the enemas. Let's just focus on transition, cleaning yourself out, maybe get on some we'll recommend the green juices if they're really acidic, to try to neutralize the acid system, and that kind of stuff. And and then you just keep working the system. So eventually, you're able to get back to those enemas and use them as a tool. But that's how we just look at it. It's just a tool, and we find that it can be in the condition that we are in, that it can be a very helpful tool, as a kind of, in the long run, because once you start to do this for a really long time, and when you're not dealing with the immediacy of being chronically ill, or being so tired you can't get out of bed, or once you get past that, which a lot of people, they're kind of focused in that world. But once you do heal yourself to a certain level and you get past that, then it's about getting deeper and deeper into your tissue system, in terms of, now we're talking about the transformation that I alluded to earlier. And what you start to see is you get deeper and deeper, like you're eating nothing but fruit, or you're doing a fruit juice fast or something, and you're months into doing something like that, and you're doing some lemon juice, distilled water enemas, and you have stuff that smells like dead animal, rotten egg coming out of you months into that. It puts into perspective how filthy we are as a species. And that's and people don't like us to talk like that. You always say we're filthy, and it's like, it's not meant to. It's kind of like you do in Alcoholics Anonymous, where you have to acknowledge and accept. It was, they say, the first step is acceptance. You have to accept. It's not about being hard on yourself or some kind of low self-esteem thing, because that's where I actually had to be careful. I started monitoring that, or explaining that more, because I was noticing that there would be folks that had kind of low self-esteem. And if we would talk about that, like humans are the filthiest animals on the planet, and start talking like that, that some people, they're so hard on themselves that it made them feel worse about themselves. And to me, it's good news. It's like, now I understand what the problem is. And so it's not like a personal kind of, we're all in this thing together. Our ancestors did this together. So we just have a lot of work to do to clean ourselves up in the long run. And so, but again, a lot of the people don't like to think like that, because they want to get to, well, I'm 100% mucus free, I'm 100% fruitarian, or they want to get to some kind of space, and they think that they've arrived, that's as far as you need to go. And that's where I'm like, no, we got way more work to do. Like, I don't care how far you think we got more. There's further to go. There's more work to do. Clean ourselves up.
No, exactly, man. And like, something that I just wanted to put on there too, for people that have that low self-esteem, I say to clients that you sort of see that when I use similar phrasing, that they sort of look really like they've just been hit upside the head or something. And you go, like, I'll say to them, this filth isn't you. This filth is external trash that you've added continuously to your body, that, you know, you had lymphatic stagnation, waste from your mother as well, and then what you ate growing up that wasn't your fault, and that you now have a system to get rid of it. And that when you smell those smells, when you see those things coming out and you're like, damn, that is gross, you go, well, that's, thank God that's out. And that isn't me. That's not like an organ falling out of your body. That's not a part of you. That's literally decaying, rotting, eroding waste that is otherwise doing damage in your system that you now have out of you. And whenever I use that approach with someone that I can see that they are struggling hearing that, or like struggling, that there's, like, you may see worms, you're going to see worms come out of you. You've eaten these foods, I can pretty much guarantee it. What worms? What do you mean? And it's like, don't freak out. Like, they're here trying to break down that waste because you've poisoned yourself with these foods. And they're there because of those things, not just because they want to live in you and have worm city. Like, no. And once they get that, you know, they think, well, I've always got this. Like, Morse will use an expression with because fungus is a big thing with people, like the fungus among us kind of thing. Like, people love eating. I think Morse has a line that people that don't drink is like, well, you're still an alcoholic because you eat a high protein food with a starch or something. Because you've always got that fermentation, cultured cheeses and all that other stuff.
Right.
But I wanted to just before we move on, I wanted to just add a note there with the coffee there. When you see someone that eats that can't have a bowel movement without the coffee, so you even see the difference. If someone does a coffee enema, then they have the bowel movements. But if they don't, they'll have a coffee because they need that adrenal stimulation. It's something that people don't understand, and a good endocrinologist should be able to explain this. Is that the adrenal glands, and if any endocrinologist watching this, it's like,
you already know they can't.
Yeah, the adrenal glands, they essentially are part of the ANS, the autonomic nervous system, and that's automated functions. So going to the bathroom when essentially your sphincter opens and closes automatically, that's the adrenal glands. So once you suppress those so much, so these muscular movements in the body, not only at that part of the body, but anywhere else where there's maybe a muscle's meant to flex, to move something, that just becomes weaker and weaker to the point where it may not even happen. Then you need to have a coffee. You need to have something that stimulates the hell out of your adrenal glands, like flogging a tired horse, like get up, get up. And then that's why they see that issue. And that's just endocrinology, like what should be endocrinology 101. And that's why our focus through like herbs, so to speak, is always adrenals and kidneys. It's like kidneys, adrenals, because the adrenals control the kidneys. They sit on top. They're little batteries, like you said. These are the doorways for your lymph system to come out, so then your blood can clean itself properly and so on. But it's like the fact that's so overlooked and that people don't know that, you know, I've always wondered, like, if this was taught at schools, would live in definitely a very different place.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to, I think we sort of touched on it on the beginning, but you know, you see these Puritan sort of, like, you know, Morse used to be, and he openly says he used to be like, though he is of course a fruitarian thinker, he doesn't push fruitarian living. He pushes it for deep healing for periods of time, no doubt, for especially those that are seriously need it, along with the herbs. But for those that, you know, like, oh, all fruit or all raw, I'd rather have cashew cheese over sweet potato or whatever, why that isn't such a good idea, especially the mental strain, I think, of having that. I used to have that big time. I used to have this raw is law, though I think it is law in terms of being a natural being. I don't think it's applicable to humans in our current state of how degraded we are. But why using cooked foods in a rational way, in a smart way, is so critical, because I think Morse's detox programs pretty much match Arnold Ehret's mucusless system to the T almost. That he doesn't say this is the mucusless system, but you can see that it is. You've got a green salad there to slow detox, to move stuff out. You've got a sweet potato or steamed mucusless vegetables. And maybe also explain like what mucusless actually means. I know there'll be a lot of people, friends of mine watching, that are quite new to this, that they'll be like, what do you mean mucusless?
Yeah. So mucusless refers to foods that do not degrade into slime in the body or outside the body. When we say pus forming foods, we are talking about mucus forming foods that have a very concentrated form of mucus. And these are animal products. So it's basically what dead animal flesh decays into if you let it just sit somewhere, and it's going to get nasty and real concentrated form of slime. And then somebody says, yeah, but we have stomach acid and that helps digest and deal with it. Then we say, well, not all of it, because it's so yeah, and then now you're creating all this extra acid. Your body has to produce this extra acid to just try and deal with these foods that you're not supposed to eat. Because once you neutralize and remove all of those acids from your body, you no longer have the craving or the taste for the dead animal flesh and the pus forming, and that's why the meat and the dairy or the pus forming foods are generally fairly easy to get off of. That's why we say mucus is the most addictive substance on the planet. Like mucus, not pus. It's a lot of people get off of meat every day, and it's not that hard. Get off of mucus. Go 10 years without eating any mucus. That's hard, so that's where the transition diet is very helpful, because I don't know the folks that, most, I know maybe one, but there's a lot of the folks that say they're fruitarian. They're not mucus free. They might be eating things that are technically fruits, even if they're eating the culinary fruit, vegetables, or whatever, that kind of stuff, which is, is fine, but they just don't have a mucus-free consciousness. So when you're thinking in terms of mucus-free, where that is an important destination, that's an important place to visit, you don't have to be 100% mucus-free all the time. But for a lot of people, going several days 100% mucus-free is a fasting level for them. Basically their body responds as if they're fasting just by eating nothing but fruits and green leafy vegetables for several days. But once you start to master the principles of the transition, and you experiment with different foods, and you start to see what can really help you along, when you say baked spaghetti squash or all the different squashes, and you combine that with a big raw salad, that, as opposed to having a big raw salad with, again, a bunch of nuts and seeds and raw pate and dehydrated bread, and you get all this kind of stuff, that half that stuff doesn't eliminate well.
No.
I disagree with, one time I looked into the history of that, the reasoning. A lot of in the raw food world, they say that anything cooked over a certain degree, you kill the enzymes and it can't eliminate well. But then those same people are, because they refuse to use any cooked mucus-free foods, they're taking a bunch of enzymes, and they feel like they got to take enzymes to help eliminate the raw foods that they're eating. And so
that's huge.
Yeah, and so it's like, so that's where it's like, we say the baked fruit and stewed fruit. I mean, we're one of the only people I know of that really talk about that and use that within the methodology.
It's so important. Yeah,
it's such a great tool.
Yeah. No, I know, like, as I mentioned before, if you've got massive stomach problems, or if the raw fruit is like way too intense, the cooking of the fruit is still so powerful. I think grapes is another good example of like cooked grapes, grape juice is, in a way, it's almost, I had a friend who she's an avid, I think you actually follow her on Instagram, Ren Sunglow. She big doer of the cooked grape juice, and she calls it like a glorified dry fast. And I've experienced that with like filtration wise, and this is where you see these tools, as you said, like these are great tools, like using the cooked and being smart about using the cooked fruit, cooked apples, like as you said, like the amount of cool recipes you have with the different baked squashes, different baked sweet fruits. It's so vital. And I have a client who's got major stomach problems who has to use that. We have to use that, and greens, more greens, because they're like way more alkaline. It's not just about, you know, when Morse talks in a Q&A about someone that's wrote into him, he's talking to that person, like to that person in a very critical situation. It's not like someone going, hey, I'm feeling a bit iffy, what can I do? And this is where like just having that knowledge and knowing exactly what to do in that area is so critical. And I wanted to also touch on genetic strength, because in the eyes you can see the genetic strength of an individual. And Morse has openly said, you know, if you're, and I've seen this with myself and with others, like you can have a lot of stagnation in your system, but if you've got strong constitution, you could get by without using the herbs in most cases. But if you're someone that's really weak, like you have major problems and you're genetically inferior in virtually every aspect, like usually people these days have chronic adrenals and kidneys across the board, but let's say they're weak and then genetically weak on top of that, that's when you start to see, okay, maybe I need these trainers, the herbs. I need these little re-educators to help retrain these areas up. And this is why you can like look at your eye and you can see in your eyes by getting like that simplified iridology book was like $10, and you can see this very basic English, like, hey, I got these problems, sort of, right, okay, now I can use transition and I can get started eating fruits instead of soda pop and whatever else. And you're going to be fine, and focus on that, not on herbs. Like, you know, said before, people focus so heavily on the
and
herbs.
I guess where you bring up a good, that would be a potential, the diagnostic methodologies. We don't use the iridology as much as because, and I had studied it, I got into it for a while, but I was already so good at Ehret's diagnostic methods that I personally didn't need that particular tool, because I would nail it every time. Like, and so, and then sometimes people, they will have got worked with somebody that had did their eyes and all that kind of stuff, and I'm reading the things that I look at, and I'm just nailing. They're like, oh yeah, that's what they said, and that's what they said my eyes said, and that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, but I'm reading, you know, that it's the Ehret's diagnostic methods is again, it's that classic. It's hitting it from a little different angle, because we're really looking at it's not as systematic in terms of where it's, you know, facial or trying to look for certain. It's just, you can kind of look at the face, look at the skin. You're taking it all in. You look at the skin or the symptoms and what people are saying, the symptomology, that kind of thing, what people used to eat. I mean, that's a big one for me, is just, if you tell me what you used to eat and what you've been eating for the past several days and your symptoms, like I can get pretty far with that. But no, sure. that came up where, no, I definitely respect the eyes. It, you know, in my case, if you have really dark brown eyes, man, it's hard, really hard. Back when I was trying to get pictures and stuff of my eyes, because mine are almost too dark to really get some decent pictures. But it's easier for me. It's actually, I haven't done it in a long time. But when my eyes did change back like 10 years ago when I was really into this hardcore, and I could look at it in the mirror with a couple, you know, flashlights and I could isolate it, but I could never really get a good picture. And I even tried to buy some of those, you know, those like iridology things they were selling back then. And I never really got it to work real well. But just that came to my mind, where, because I encourage people to learn all of them, you know, and to learn both, and to develop you know, to don't feel like you have to rely on one diagnostic tool, because that was been a thing that I've noticed when I would come across some folks coming out of Morse. They would rely almost in my opinion, they were relying too heavily on their reading of the eyes, and they were missing things, because it's like, yeah, but okay, you saw that in the eyes, but did you hear what they just said, their symptoms, or the way they look, or what they're eating? You know, they're kind of disregarding these other pieces. And so I find that to be problematic. But
majorly.
yeah.
I wanted to touch, you've actually opened up a really cool area there, because there's something that just on one of the previous lessons was on how a lot of the old school iridology guys used overlays, and Morse isn't a fan of overlays. He pretty much free does it, like, in a way.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
because the overlays aren't accurate, it's not fixed.
right.
If you've got prolapse in an area, if you've got, everyone's a little bit shaped a little bit differently. So 6 o'clock might be the leg on each side, but it's like,
Yeah.
is it a bit over? That's where you use the symptomology of asking the client, like, what have you been eating? How are you feeling? I've got really sore knee all the time, or whatever it is, using this, because that's pretty much going to nail majority. What I see the eyes being super helpful for is if you're dealing with someone that's on a ton of medications, you can almost just confirm that with, okay, that's definitely that area there. Now you can work with your doctor to titrate off of that medication while we're doing the program. But man, I've had so many clients, I just cannot even like say how many, that have had false iris readings. And it's really sad to see that people don't know what they're doing, and they tell them concretely something. And it's like, man, no, that's not good, because you've completely misread it. And recently Morse did a case that I'd already done, and my reading was identical to his. I think I missed one minor thing on the eye, and I was like, okay, I'm happy with that. Like, I'm reading it because I want that feedback. So I use it as a bit of feedback for myself as well. I'm like, I want to make sure I'm doing this correctly, because I've had clients or friends say, well, I never told you any of that. You did my health form, you looked at my symptoms, you did my eyes, and now you've pretty much pinpointed issues I've had that I've never even told you about.
Right.
And like what you said, when you've got people, you're like doing your method, and they're like, oh yeah, well, I had that. It's like, yeah, well, I'm doing it this way, and I can still see.
Yeah.
You can't hide. You can't hide from me,
yeah.
man.
Because you can't, we can, and because there's something to developing a master, like picking one thing and developing a mastery in that, but then also being aware of the different things that's out there that you can use, because then there's other, folks that get into the different energy readings in the body and this kind of stuff. And when it's done at a master level, they can do the same thing, because the principle of, as Ehret puts it, vitality equals power minus obstruction.
Yeah, it's
And
brilliant.
saying that constipation is the foundation of all disease and illness, is wherever there's issues, there's some kind of constipation that is at the foundation of that. Even if you're talking about endocrine system, for the endocrine system to get in a bad state, it took constipation first.
Yeah,
there had to be constipation first. Then the residual outcome is the destruction of those glands. But yeah, that's an interesting, because what I was starting to see too that concerned me along those lines was there was people, because I would get people that would come to me after they had worked with someone, different detoxification specialists or folks that had even went to different schools or whatever. And they would almost always, it seemed like people were prescribing, they were basically treating herbs like medications.
Yeah.
So they read the irises and then just give a prescription based on maybe some symptomology and the iris. And I could tell that they really didn't understand how the body healed. Because then and sometimes I'd talk to them, if I talk to somebody, and I can tell real quick if they really know this stuff. It's like they really understand. We don't have to use the same words. It's not about, because that's what they think. They'll think that just saying the same words, they'll throw these words out, and it's like, oh yeah, you're in the club, you're saying the words. Like, I could care less about the words. I'm the meaning. You can use totally different words, but explain the same principles of elimination. And that's what I'm interested in. And when you really understand that, then you can really, really help people at such a higher level. But yeah, that was a concern, because that really seemed to be getting to a point where, because then that's when they would get surprised that I wouldn't recommend herbs. I would like, look, you don't need herbs right now. You need to transition. Like, let's transition you for a month. And then if you need it, we'll get into some herbs or, but like first let's find your baseline with the diet, then we'll take a look at the herbs or, look at the different, and there's because I'm also a fan with Morse of, just all the different rational naturopathic tools that are there that all, whether it's hot, cold compresses and, that I don't know if it was him, if I got that from him or somebody else, but the, what's it called? The, horseradish root therapy. I don't think I got that from Morris. I don't know where I got, because Ehret talked about the horseradish root, but basically, so what I created this triad, and this was, if you have any issues up here in your head or stagnant lymph up here, you take first, you can do some of that, the lymphatic massage, there's this video that does like the self lymphatic massage, but you take the horseradish root and cut just like a little nub off and chew it and keep your mouth closed for 30, and within 30 seconds, it feels like your ears are on fire. It creates this whole effect of your whole head opens up. And so then you just keep your mouth closed for just maybe a minute or two. Make sure you want to put your tongue to the side and kind of just hold it between your teeth, because it'll start burning your tongue or feeling like it's burning. But you do that, then do Morris's eye wash with the eye cup, and then the eye wash herbs in some water, and do that a few times on both sides. And then you do the Heal All Tea neti pot with the nose. So you do all three of those with the lymphatic massage. And then and now I used to like, I don't know why that's gone, but the upper circulation.
It's now just blood. It's now just blood. So they've got upper and lower inward.
Yeah. I mean, is it as good? Like, is it?
Man, I feel it. Like, because I need some serious upper circ for the like the nerving in the teeth, and man, I'm currently on them, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah, because that was always the upper circulation and brain and nerve number 2. That was the old school recommendation. But yeah, you do all of that stuff, man. I mean, you're just, your whole head. You do that for a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah,
is gonna, whatever you got going on in your head is gonna be gone.
Yeah, there's also the like the raw potato. If you get like something on if you want to pull astringently out, you can put like raw, because raw potato is so astringent, and you just cake mucus out if you're someone that's got something stuck in your eye, in conjunction with the eye wash. As you said, like these amazing tools, like how the Heal All Tea can be used for female douching for like atypical cells, like, and how that turns around pretty much across the board. I've had that experience with clients too. It's amazing seeing that. And there was something else you went on to there that I wanted to touch on that was really important, because the Morse doesn't have the same equation as Ehret, but that same process of, people think in terms of treatment and deficiencies. Like people, this raw world, people go down the whole supplement, and Morse just, like with you, shares that same of like, that's not holistic. Why would I look into supplements? Why would I even think that way? You're going to create an imbalance. It's not actually addressing the way your body functions. And when it comes to herbs, that's right. So when it comes to people using herbs for treatment, there's one thing I've seen some people do, and this is like, I would say the word's foolish is probably the operative word, but if you've got a problem and it's stagnation is essentially the issue. So we need to get movement happening. I'm not just going to let's, for example, say you've got a weak you've got a slightly weak pituitary gland, let's say. And it's like, unless you're having major sleep problems and hormonal issues, then maybe using one from the get-go can be a good idea, and then ramping it up later. Reason why you may not want to even do that at the beginning is it's too stagnated. We need to get the stagnation out and not just throw something at it immediately. So that's where being smart with, when am I going to start going after that part of the body? Maybe I need to clean it up first. And using like the analogy with a house, it's like, I've got broken floorboards. I'm not just going to, start repainting it yet. I'm going to rip it out. I'm going to get the stagnation out. And then now I've got the clean slate, the area where I can rebuild. All right, where's the goodies at? Where's the herbs at? Where's these tools that I can use to help make this the best pituitary gland that it can be?
Right.
And also, yeah, that thinking of treatment, like Western naturopathy, which is not real naturopathy, uses herbs for treatment. Yeah, it's like
in integrative medicine. I started hearing that term like 10 years ago. That was silly.
Oh man, it is silly. It's honestly silly is the best, and it's an insult to what has been naturally gifted to us here. Like it's an absolute, and it's very arrogant and narcissistic of humans to even think and to have the audacity to say that you are. I don't know. I don't let. But it's like herbs are for cells. They're for tissues, and they're there. It's like the same way the lemon is astringing, whether it's eating or through an enema. It's pulling through the bowel wall. It's pulling waste out and then move. Like pull, move. It's like, what is the phrase Morse uses? It's like, yeah, cleaning and strengthening, cleaning and strengthening, cleaning and strengthening. Whereas we have this focus on take a supplement, and especially in this raw food thing, I think this is important. You see these people do these interviews and stuff, and then they have a video, and it's like, this is what I take as a raw foodist, or this is what I take as someone doing this cleaner way, fruit, vegetable way of eating, and they've got like a plethora of supplements. And I've never seen a deficiency in someone that goes after removing stagnation. Because if you make that your focus, and I'm sure you see that with people you've worked with and yourself, it's like, we don't rely on supplements. We don't use that as the backbone of, well, I'm only healthy on this way because I have this supplement.
I mean, that's like a whole, that people get so confused with all that. And I know we're pretty, people look at us as being pretty extreme with our stance on the concept of nutrition. So for us,
I think we get the same too.
Where we're just that we call it the additive principle. So there's an idea that you need to bring all of this chemistry in, and that your body's gonna use it and convert it, and you need to replenish stuff. And I agree with, I've heard Morris say, basically get the glands functioning, because you're producing what you need in your body. And if you need, so you could look at it from that perspective, or look at it from the fruit perspective. There's different perspectives you can look at. We look at eating from the perspective of elimination. So the reason we eat, in our opinion, is to aid the body in its elimination. So that's where we then start to differ, where these folks are saying, well, you need your you need this protein food, or you need that, or you better get your B12, or all this kind of stuff. And we're like, no, we don't need that. Because the glands, all of those symptoms, when people have symptoms that would be related to so-called deficiencies, instead of getting scared, let's take a look at those symptoms, and let's see what glands and organs those are related to. And then let's heal the organ in the gland. And I bet that you will actually heal what you recognize. They're just symptoms, but you're connecting it to this concept of deficiency when you heal your organ and your glands, and that goes away regardless of what you're eating. If you're getting this or that, it's like, no, you remove that problem and move on with your life. But that it's a total different paradigm when they're trying to get down into the weeds of these and all of these concepts. I do deep dives into the history of the protein theory and the vitamin theory and the B12 theory and all these different theories, and really examine the foundation of them. And you really quickly, you can start to see how ridiculous they are. And because most people, they don't know that the protein theory is based on starving dogs. This guy named Francois Magendie in the 1800s, who ended up having government actually sanction him, because it got out that he was just torturing. He loved torturing dogs. He was just a psychopath. We have him to thank for the protein theory and its modern variant, the way him and the chemist named Mulder, I think, who actually like coined the term. Then Francois came in and he started using that terminology and became the protein theory. The vitamin theories you get in, or calorie theory, Atwater, the Wilbur Atwater, wrote the book on calorie, and you start to read that book and you're calories. Like, this is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous theory. This whole thing is ridiculous. And people spend they have whole, lives and livelihoods based on this really ridiculous theory of calories. And but it was these old theories. So that's where we're like, look, just what does the body function like when the organs and the glands are doing what they're supposed to do? Lymphatic system, your kidneys are filtering, your blood is getting cleaner and cleaner. Try that first. If that doesn't work, then maybe we're wrong, and you can go get all your your B12 shots or whatever nonsense kind of stuff you want to get into. But try having a healthy body first and see if that actually takes care of the issue. That's my opinion.
No, I love that opinion, and I just wanted to reiterate that here before I make this next opinion statement. Is we're just two guys with two opinions here. This is going to go on YouTube. We're just having a discussion, and we're not trying to replace. I'm not trying to replace medical advice or anything, and so if you're someone that's in fear and you think you need to take these medications or supplements, a question you can ask yourself is, if I remove the stagnation and the obstruction, so I open up, like Morse's equation is essentially, am I digesting, absorbing, utilizing, and eliminating? If either one of those is off, you're going to have issues. It's like they all need to be functioning, and it's not as concise and as cool as Ehret's one. That's always love that equation that he's got there. But that's that same premise of, am I still going to see a deficiency after all of those pillars, if you will, have been ticked off? And from what I see and what Morse has seen for over 50 years is no, those problems aren't there anymore. And so we just use that as the observational tool of what really science is all about, is observed reality of like what is happening. We don't have a predetermined outcome. We just look at what happens, and the clients and ourselves speak multitudes to that. And that's just, I think the next thing there is like the calorie side of things. A lot of people go, you're not eating enough. I was being vegan for years, always on chronometer, like putting stuff in, like feeling really bad if I didn't meet a quota, didn't get my daily whatever, always watching confusing nutrition videos. And then once I moved into this, it's no longer, you're not thinking in the same terms anymore. Because if calories really was the problem, I should be skin and bone with no energy at all. I'm technically on a permanent calorie deficit. Some days you eat more when you expend more energy. And I think that's where the focus needs to be, is get the calorie idea out of your head. Look at what is the energy that I'm getting from the food, and also how simple is the food that eliminates so well that my body can function with all its energy perfectly. Because if you're adding all this stagnant food, all the energy has to go to that to help get rid of it, because the body's going, why is this here? I don't want this. This isn't meant to be in my system. And then, that's why you see people after eating a heavy meal, they'll have a nap or something. Right. And like what, because I think we definitely share that. That's where another overlap here with the Ehret, the Professor Spira approach and the Morse approach is, we don't push and go into the supplement world. We don't think in terms of calories. We don't think in terms of diseases. When you look into these things, and I encourage people to do this, look into how many of these are actually theoretical. I've had many conversations with medical doctors that don't really like me because I've called them out on theories. Right. With clients. I've been there with clients, and I've said, you're saying that this is a fact, but it's a theory. And you can just be honest, man. Just be honest that it's a theory, because you're going to confuse and hurt people. And a calorie is another great one, because everything is based on how many calories in this, how many calories on that, and you'll be lost forever. Like Morse has a great line, like Western scientific man is like lost somewhere in time and space, spinning in their ego just endlessly.
Yeah. And then on top of that, from a cultural standpoint, it's not scientists that are really even bringing a lot of this to the table. It's marketers.
Yeah.
So, because for every theory that we latch onto, there were maybe 10 different theories in academia somewhere amongst the scientific academic community, but you would never hear about the whole sampling of all these different of all these different theories. You just hear the one that the marketers want to teach you. And we had just recently, we have a little book club in that we mucus-free book club, and we go through the books and analyze, but we always do this real deep dive into ancillary documentation of things, where we read the Atwater's book, the calorie theory book and stuff. But we just watched one, a history of it was one that was the history of food advertising. And when you start to look, I say most people's concept of nutrition, they didn't learn it in a school. They didn't learn it from some kind of doctor. They learned it from, Rice Krispie bear or whatever, whatever the Rice Krispie little gnomes and the Tony the Tiger and these commercials, mascots on commercials, because it's always part of a balanced breakfast. A lot of vitamin C. Get your protein in this cereal or in this milk or in whatever. Got milk. Get all the protein you need. So we're inundated with this conditioning based on the additive principle, based on these concepts, and you're not taught from a young age. They generally don't teach you, unless you have a parent that teaches you how to be critical. They don't teach you critical thinking. They teach you what they want you to think. So they want you to believe into the protein theory. They want you to the point where it's this fanaticism. It's really bizarre when you no longer believe in it and you're just looking at the way people talk, because there's such a deep fear that you're not going to get enough of something, as opposed to a fear of not being able to eliminate that which you're putting in. It's a total different paradigm. And I would say, we would even go a step further in terms of the body, where with Arnold Ehret's perspective, you look at the body as an air gas engine. So the baseline is air. And so the cleaner you are, the better you're going to be able to absorb and utilize oxygen. And you'll find that you have more energy with less food, because you're actually using, most people don't use the oxygen at all, and you get a handful of people that might have a bad diet, but they do a little breath work. And so maybe then they end up still having problems because they don't have their diet together, but they'll have the benefit of breath work. But if you have the diet and you understand why those people are in a better shape, and get yourself into understanding the breath, like we've been doing a lot of where we talk about just the primacy of the breath, and how is even each breath you're eliminating. That's an elimination process. You breathe in, and with each breath you're cleaning your blood. When your body has less and less stagnant lymph, old toxic waste, uneliminated feces and mucus and that kind of stuff, the breath works so much better. It's like where you find yourself getting massive amounts of energy from the breathing process, and you add a little fruit to that, then you're like, ooh, and that's, but then here comes the need to eat vegetables, not from a nutritional standpoint, but from an elimination standpoint, because you need that alkaline chemistry. You need to get your bowels moving. Because one of the things that I find myself often, one of the first things I tend to recommend to former raw foodists that I work with, that went as far as they could in that direction, then they need some
Yeah.
help. I'll almost always recommend you need to eat more food. They're not eating enough to even create natural bowel movements because they'll have a handful of grapes or,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not that you need to eat more to get calories. You need to eat more for cleansing purposes. So create
Yeah.
the bowel movement, get this stuff going through your body, get the nice combination salad so that it can go through
Yeah.
your body and clean the walls of your intestines.
That's brilliant. So yeah, because that's a very similar view that we are taught at the school is the section on nutrition is more based on energy of the food and that elimination point
Yeah.
is because I've experienced that myself with where I've just eaten like small handfuls of grapes, as you said, and then it's just like, man, I should have gone to the bathroom by now. And then you go, well, no, there's not enough volume there to eliminate properly, to
Right.
form that movement out of there. And opposed to, as you said, just in summary there, guys, that what Spira is talking about is viewing the food as an elimination. It's seeing your body to function the best with the best elimination over, well, what about nutrition? Like if you start viewing nutrition in terms of energy and elimination and have that as the foundation of why I would eat something, opposed to what's the macro micronutrient breakdown of this, what's the protein, it's like you're going to be confused out of your mind if you continue doing that. And I've been there. I've been down there, that working out, calories, all of that. It's like I'm stronger than I've ever been and I'm leaner, but I'm stronger. So what's with that? You know, no one can answer that. It's like, I think you said on a discussion with Brother Air one time, you said it was brilliant. You guys were saying about, you know, all these bubble bodybuilders and so on. And it's like, if it meant that I was the leanest that I possibly could be at the exchange of being the most vital movement and energy, and it's like I would have that any day of the week because I want to be able to move my arm. I want to be able to
Right.
pick things up. I don't want to be struggling. And I think this is where a lot of people in this movement, they do get very physically focused, and they're missing a huge point. I think as long as we are always looking at how do I physically look? How do I feel now because of this physical change, opposed to what's the bigger picture? The bigger picture, like I think you pretty much nailed it before, is how can we strengthen ourselves so that our offspring are a superior version of us, and then so on and so on and so forth. And then on top of that, you have the way you perceive things changes, the way you relate to nature changes. You're not thinking in terms of, you know, like when I used to eat animal products, I was one of the most aggressive people I knew. You know, like I was so angry I accidentally nearly killed my brother. You know, there were things that happened based on foods that I ate that I didn't make the connection with, that I had suppressed using those foods, and the energy getting from those foods, the energy transfer from negative, or like what you call like very acidic, and also the energy of what the animal went through, like the transfer of that going into your being. And I think that's why we see great success as well with, you know, the Ehret approach and Morse's approach with even people with forms of autism. And this, like, you know, where we see kids very, very angry that, you know, one moment are throwing chairs around, and next thing on a bit of a herbal program with, you know, transition foods, and then going to more high energy fruit, it just starts to calm down the being of the individual.
Right.
Yeah, which is that's why, like, it's not just one thing. It's not just that's what I think is so brilliant with, because I had people ask me, oh, how is this just not another fad? Or like, oh, this Professor Spira book's just a fad. And it's just like, ask yourself those questions of like, am I eliminating properly? Have I removed the stagnation? What species do I actually most closely relate to? Am I truly a carnivore? Good luck going that route. Am I truly an elephant? Good luck even going there. It's like, am I a bird? No. Am I a shark? No. You got to ask yourself these things, and common sense, hopefully that isn't quite dead yet in you, will start to come back to the surface, and you'll start to have a little chuckle and be like, "Hey, actually, that's a really silly fallacy that I've created."
Right.
Yeah. So I just wanted to check, Spira, though, how are we going for time? How much longer would you be willing to go? Do you want to wrap it up pretty soon? Or?
We could get a little bit longer.
Cool.
Yeah, go a little,
Cool, man. Awesome. Yeah. So I wanted to touch on, if maybe we've elaborated enough, but the nutrition side, I think this is huge, like deficiencies with the way the food's grown, you know, this sort of thing is huge. This my sort of take on it, and my opinion on it, and which shares very similarly to Dr. Morse's. For one, the energy of the food, we're not talking about mineral vitamin balance anymore. We're talking about energy and elimination of how the body functions. It's a functioning system, not a what was the term you used before? It was the uh, with like supplements. It's like with adding,
the
like
additive principle.
Additive principle, exactly. Yeah. So if you don't start viewing your food as an elimination fuel for your system, opposed to an additive that is somehow meant to give you all these nutrients that are meant to do all these things, which is a weird way to think about it. Right. And so when it comes to sort of like the nutrition side of things from a Morse stance, is it's always based on the way that the body can gain energy, and we shouldn't be worrying about the way it's grown in terms of if we're eating. This is what I'm trying to say. Like, what am I trying to say here? I remember now. Is people talk about topsoil, and I hear this all the time. That's why I need to take this vitamin or whatever, and that really bases in fear. It's like using that as their driver, and I've been there many times where, you know, when I make that justification, it's because I have a fear that if I don't take it, I will die or have inferior health, because I need to take that supplement because of these things. But when you actually look at how fruit, specifically tropical fruit, is grown, it doesn't grow in topsoil. Like, roots don't just stop at the topsoil level and I'm done. Okay, I'm not going to grow anymore. If there's no nutrients there, if there's no energy for the plant, it'll grow as far as it can. If it gets blocked by something, sure, it will have to go around if it can. But I always encourage people to look at in that way of, if you are really concerned, and we live in a world where things are being heavily hammered and things are being manipulated and changed, and you can do your research on that and the food chain and all of that. But when you look at, it's interesting, here in Australia, we get a lot of flooding. And the only foods that don't get affected are fruit trees. Those things just withstand the things like potato crops, lettuce crops, these things that are grown. Like, you go past a lettuce farm or a potato or even a strawberry, there's these mounds, and they plant them in the mounds. That's literally into their soil. That's not into nature. That's a man-made supplement soil that they're planting those potatoes in. So you're going to have issues with that. You're not going to have issues with picking a mango, getting a mango from up north where it grows in the tropics, essentially, for us. And those trees are huge. Their root systems are just as wide as the trees, if not larger, that aren't in topsoil. So I just wanted to see what your sort of take on that is. But obviously the elimination one is the critical one, that guys just have that in the back of your head, is even if something's not ideal, what can I consume to eliminate? And that is what we've essentially been discussing.
Yeah. So I know we're more, I think it's not even that we just explain and sort of look at these things a little differently. So, because I know where he's coming from, the energetics of the food, this idea of the energetics and the kind of biochemistry, the relationship that your body has with the proper foods, the foods that were meant for our body, or the fruits, or the vegetables, or just, I know the fruits, but the chemistry of the vegetables, anything that's mucus free that helps your body eliminate, there's a good biochemical relationship that the body has with it. That's where nutrition people want to try to give the reason that you're supposed to eat those things, is because, well, it has all of these individual things in it. There's these things inside that are really good, instead of looking at it holistically, where this is just it's a high energetic, an apple has a lot more energetics than a chicken leg. The chicken head, and the apple, it's living food. And so it's where people talk, we don't always use that word all the time, as other people use that all, the living foods and that stuff. For us, that's just, you're supposed to know that, you're supposed to, we eat living foods. But the energetics from that standpoint, and he's looking at it in terms of the inner the cells. Where I would look at it a little differently is, I'm kind of see it from that's where we kind of could look at fruits, even fruit as a stimulant. It's just a stimulant that doesn't kill you. So whether fruit or the vegetable is not as much of a stimulant, but that's why people certain people will try to skip over vegetables, because they'll go from their regular diet and then they'll be like, oh, we're fruitarians, and try to eat nothing but fruit, eat very little vegetables, because the fruit gets you kind of high. You get that fruit sugar hit your blood, and it's like, so it's nature's it's a nature's blessing, because it's like, okay, you can feel good and get high, but you can also clean yourself out, but you can only do it with these foods. Like, this is what you're supposed to use for that. Versus then when you get into the vegetables, we need those because we're that filthy. Like, we need to use these vegetables to heal, neutralize, all those kind of things. But you're not going to get the same high from eating most of us, eating a salad versus eating a pineapple. You're not going to get that same kind of stimulation, and you're not supposed to. But some people really, they hate that feeling. Because they're addicted to being stimulated, it's hard for them to understand that there's a time and a place for the fruits and the vegetables. You're not supposed to be up running marathons 24 hours a day. Sometimes you need to just eat your vegetables and just veg out. Yeah, just sit there.
Come back down a bit. Yeah,
just come down. And that's really, coming down from the stimulant is hard for people to do. And then the connection that they really don't get is for people that start to get really bad fatigue symptoms, especially even at a young age, and they start going through all that, they don't make the connection that they were getting, their body was so addicted to being high off of this high octane stimulant, that's very acidic and dangerous to the body, which is the meat and the dairy and this kind of stuff. And so when you start to take that away, you're going to come down. You're coming down off of these drugs, off of this stimulant, and you might not be clean enough to handle eating a whole lot of fruit yet. So you have this period where that's where the transition comes into play, because if you put you on all fruit, you're going to have some serious toxicity problems because you haven't really cleaned yourself out. But you don't know, or if you're coming, the coffee, I've had to work with. That's been an interesting one, because that's one of all the things I used to do. That was one thing I was never into coffee. So that was one addiction.
That's like my partner. She hates it. She hates the smell, and I'm like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's such a bad drug, man.
Because caffeine generally gave me headaches, and so it didn't do the same thing to my body it did to other people. I just didn't like it. But whatever your stimulant is, so I kind of look at it like you are transitioning to a higher grade of stimulant that heals you and doesn't kill you. That doesn't create that acidosis. And then eventually the cleaner you get, because I'm still I don't look at the foods or even the herbs as the healers, in the sense of it's the body that heals itself.
Yeah.
But the herbs and the fruit and the vegetables and the hot cold packs and the whatever, all the tools that we have, the glandulars, the controversial things that like, don't talk about that unless somebody's laying on their deathbed and they really need that. Then it's, again, naturopathy, what works. It's like, you don't see me talking about that because it's politically not the greatest thing to talk about, but it doesn't work or not. Yeah, that's hush, like, shh. And if you don't know what that is, don't look it up. Shh.
Yeah, even in the Morse world, the glandulars are a bit hush hush, like, because I have my karmic questions about it, but I also see, like, when you see people that there's something, the gland's completely flatlined, it's like that's in a couple weeks or so, like that can perk it up for that short period use. If you're someone
Yeah,
that
yeah,
has
it's like
zero,
that the electrical taking that electric, your heart's is like you stop breathing and they hit you with that electricity, and it's that kind of thing. But it's yeah, but that's where then I brought that up because we're talking about the energetics, and that's where that makes sense to me. Where from whether you're talking fruit or you're talking to glandular or you're talking to herbs, the energetics, it can be stimulating. Either again, having that elimination effect or to stimulate, because like I said, not all stimulation is bad. It's like stimulation with a side of acidosis is deadly, but stimulation from fruit can be good. Using these different tools we have if you need to wake up some of these glands or whatever you need to do, because it's not forever. Like we said, that if you do this right and you put your endocrine system back together, you can't keep taking those things and you never have to do it again. It's one and done.
And it would not be recommended as well.
No.
Like you would never hear more saying continue to take, though. No, it just doesn't work like that.
It's one and done. And it's controversial, and of course that's controversial. That's why I only discuss that privately with people that really need it. It's not something that I recommend lightly. It's something that's because it's but you're either gonna use the things that help and for our condition, and hopefully, like I said, a couple generations down, we won't need that. We won't need those tools. We'll be at a more refined space, but yeah, we're in a heck of a condition, and that's when we're really being honest with where we are physiologically as a species, then we have to look at our options and see what we need to use. And like you said, I think there is a karmic transition, because I just look at it as part of the transition still. It's and it's this karmic kind of dynamic along with it. But like we said, it's not something you do for a long time. It's getting in there and get out. But
and it's like when it's like, because I'm a big fan of like the Essene Gospel of Peace, and a lot of the recommendations in there that Jesus makes. It's interesting that you see the degradation of the human body, and you see that we need more of these tools. Right. But I think when that was relevant with just the go and fast and use nature, the light.
Well, the angel of water, that I put that in my Spirit Speaks.
Exactly.
Suffer.
And he's got the enema in there. He's literally
enemas
got
right in there.
The original enema.
Right.
Suffer the end of the water gourd, I believe. But I think, as you said, like in generations to come, I think it would, and just same with animals. I think it would just be the water and the dry fasting that would be needed, and just go lay in the sun, like sunbathe. The amount of people I see that like the family member that's got the 3 blocked arteries, they spend most of their time sitting in front of a TV all day long. And they had to do a 180 turn in the last 2 weeks. And it's like, you get your shoes off, put your feet on the ground. You're going to spend an hour in the sun each day, and you're not going to sit in front of that TV, especially not before bed. Good luck sleeping. And the difference, like in their vitality, how they feel, is they literally look like children in terms of their energy. It's insane. And before, they looked like walking corpses. And I didn't think the discussion that my partner and I were going to have with them was going to go anywhere, but it did. Now the whole family's on board, and it's wonderful. But
nice.
I wanted to, I just lost it. Something you said there about the, was it nutrition you just said? I literally just had it, but I went down that road with the
well, we were talking about energetics, the concept of energetics and stimulation versus energy. Yes. Like where does the body really get its energy from?
So I think not necessarily better, but I think a good substitution for stimulation for when you go, because I see the way that Morse teaches it is acids and proteins are hot, so they have like a fiery effect. And when I think stimulation, and I think of my years in the past drinking a lot of coffee, I could feel that stimulation as being something that doesn't really function too well, being sort of whipped and like, oi, work, work, work. To me, that's like stimulation. It's like, do it, do it, do it. It's not doing it on its own accord. It's doing it because it's forced to. So when you start using high energetic foods, the stimulation is being replaced with a vital energy that is being fed continually to that area that is like, sweet, I've now got everything I need for me to function, and I want to function well because I have all the energy around me. So like I like using the term like vital energy is better than like instant stimulation. And that's why I look at, the carnivore movement. I'll say let's get one carnivore eater that doesn't rely on coffee. It's like, find me one. It's I'll happily chat with them because I haven't seen one. All the main players online, they all rely on coffee. They got no ATP. They got no energy from fruit. Essentially, they have none of that energy there. They're depleted, and they have to rely on the stimulation, which is that whipping of like the ding, the ding, the ding, go, 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 and just ticking time bomb until I think they're not going to last very long. But I just want to state that I like viewing it that way of I'm not stimulating anymore. I'm giving vital energy versus stimulation. I think there's a fine separation. And when I think of things that are hot, like even that thing you said with the radish, that makes perfect sense because a lot of Morse's formulas will have a little cayenne pepper in there or something. It's a little heat to get things moving. That getting things moving isn't, of course, like that doesn't mean the stimulation is not good. No, we need that's what a glandular is. It's a major stimulant. That's why you would never use it with someone that has a hyper state. You have like hyperthyroidism and you chuck someone like thyroid glandular, dude, you could chuck them into some crazy problem.
Yeah.
Big time. So yeah, I think it's a really, man, when I experienced that as well, like over the years, and actually, wow, I can actually get energy without feeling I need to just have a coffee. That was an incredible feeling. It's like a friend of mine that lives in Ecuador, Fruit Haven Eco Village. Kevin, he used to be huge on YouTube, Raw Healing Mastery. If he's watching this, mate, come back. He was an amazing dude. A lot of self experiments. Like he did everything himself, and he documented and YouTubed and everything. And he had chronic fatigue. He was so tired and emaciated. He got so thin during his healing journey that his parents got so worried that they forced him to go to hospital, and they took all his vitals. And literally the doctor said, your son has the cardiovascular system of an elite athlete, and everything is doing tests at levels I've never measured before. I don't know what your son's doing, but you need to let him do what he's doing and play it out. And he's got that on his YouTube, still discussing with a friend of his. Wow. And I just thought, and that was he was huge, like your fan of your work. He's the one that gave me your book. Morse, like all these, like, it's amazing, man. And like anyone that is like scared or whatever sort of fear in this, when it comes to this, it's like, don't educate yourself, get informed with pretty much relearning a knowledge that intrinsically all humans, I think, have dormant in them, because you're appealing to a knowingness in a huge sense, and ask yourself those questions of like, what species are we? What other species is confused out of their mind about health?
Right.
And so on. Yeah. I just had to put that in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, man, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that we haven't covered here, but I think I'm pretty happy with. If there's anything else you wanted to touch on or get into, in terms of wrapping up with sort of the similarities, we've covered the herbs, the enemas. Yeah. Anything you want to add there, Spira?
I mean, I guess I think we covered it, but I'll say it in a way. It's one of the, again, it was over the years, as I've observed Morse's community, or folks that were really getting into his work at different points over the years. And it was definitely a disconnect with some people, where Dr. Morse never said to use his methods as a lifestyle. I've just never seen him say that. He'll, like you're saying, he's pointing to, chronic illness, and here's how you heal this and that. But he's not saying that to eat like this is a lifestyle, but that for so long people, and I don't know if they're still doing that, but people were trying to take his methodologies and apply it as a lifestyle. And that's not, he never said that. No one said that, but a bunch of people got onto that. Then when they started having problems where, yeah, they might've healed what they were working on, but then you start having the problems that only transition can help. Exactly. They didn't really have that avenue because, you know, Dr. Morse, he doesn't necessarily talk a lot. We talk a lot about transition. He doesn't really talk a whole lot about that unless you ask him about it, or there's a case that demands a certain kind of transition into being able to handle the herbs or handle the fruit or something like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
But from a lifestyle, but that's why I named my company Mucus Free Life, because we're focusing on, this is a lifestyle. The transition diet is a lifestyle. And so that's where I found we've worked really well, just even if it's not conscious, but there'd be a lot of folks that had worked with Morse and kind of healed themselves, but then they got to a point where they went as far with that as they needed. Then they went and checked out, or maybe there was a video where Dr. Morse talked about the Mucusless diet, and then they're like, well, let's go read that. And then they're like, oh yeah, this is, I could live like this. You know, they see like, oh, okay, that kind of wakes them up, or they dawns on them like, oh yeah, okay, this makes sense, because you can be transitioning toward this if that is a goal of yours. If there's a goal of yours is to be fruitarian, we would just recommend, if you're going to get to the fruitarian level, be mucus free and fruit only. You know, don't just be fruitarian and then you're eating a bunch of mucus, but you know, but that's, you know, so I found that that's worked well, where a lot of folks have come over and worked with us and got on the transition diet, because everything is within it. You know, everything, the raw foodism, all the highest levels of raw foodism is inside there, but you also have the transitional items, like I said, the cottage cheese and things then yogurt, or different things that you might need at the beginning, or somebody could use as a tool if they need it. I don't really promote that anymore, but I did use it personally, just in my own transition 21 years ago. For a few months, I used the cottage cheese. There's the cottage cheese, applesauce, and dates. But because of the enemas, and that's where the enemas came in real handy, because I was cleaning myself out with those enemas, my body got to a point quicker than it otherwise would have to be totally intolerant to that. So it just got to a point where I was like, oh, I'm never eating this again. Because it was just, this feels horrible. And so then I transitioned right over to the baked banana surprise, and that was it. I was able to do that. But so that's just something I put out there as far as to folks to really understand. Morris never said that what he's teaching is for a lifestyle. It's for deep healing, and to take a look at the transition diet, Mucusless diet healing system, when it's time to buckle down and find, as I always call what we do, the middle path, the rational middle path. People they'll think it's extreme because they don't really understand what we're doing, because they'll assume that we're talking about 100% fruit and fruitarian. Just because Ehret said that we're fruit eaters, they'll assume that, oh, that's that fruit diet. No, it's a system that includes systematically transitioning and changing your physiology permanently over time, to the point where it becomes impossible to go back to foods that were just totally not designed for the body. You just can't go back to it without being really, really sick. And so that's a way to do it, where you take the willpower out of the equation. You take where it's not about willpower. It's not about belief and this mind stuff and all this. It's like, no, you've just taken your body therapeutically through this transitional process and just got to a point where your body is operating and functioning at a higher frequency with higher frequency chemistry. I won't even say food. I just say chemistry.
Yes, definitely better.
You know, it's
Yeah.
and because then the higher and higher you get to points where you can go longer without food. I don't promote that. I don't promote long-term fasting. I've
Mm.
done it. I have a lot of friends that have done it, but it was the logical conclusion and result of a well-practiced transition diet, and not some, seeing somebody on YouTube like, I did a 90-day fast, and then you're like, 90-day fast challenge, I'm gonna do it. And then that's the reason. That's not a good reason to fast.
No,
A
no.
good reason is your body demands and tells you how to fast. But
Mm.
to be able to really receive that message, you have to know a little bit, know about this stuff, and it's helpful to have had some experience.
Yeah.
Then you can read that. You start reading these things with the body, and you're like, oh yeah, it's time to fast. I mean, for me, it's just if I go through, we call it elimination. We don't call it being sick. If I
Mm.
ever go through, which has been a long time since I have, but I'm not scared of it. I invite it. If I'm gonna
Yeah.
get cold and flu-like symptom, I'm like, come on, let's do it, because I know I'm gonna be able to. That's gonna help me. Just I'm gonna be able to get so much cleaner in this little period of time, this little short period of time when I got a fever. I'm gonna just start fasting and cleansing and just skyrocket. But you find you get cleaner and cleaner. It becomes very hard to get sick. You don't get that.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen. Even if you wanted to, you'd be like, yeah, let me just go through an elimination. The body's like, you're stupid. Don't talk like that. You're fine. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so it's a dynamic, and that would just be something I'd leave with everybody, is when you look at the mucusless diet, look at the dynamic nature of it, where it really everything's in it. You have all these different fasting levels, fruit diet, all the way down to the vegetarian, transitional, the naturopathic methodologies, like all of that is inside there. And so yeah, and that's where I look at, like I said, with Dr. Morse, I appreciate that he was really inspired by that part of Ehret's work, where that became a calling for him, where he was like, man, that's what I want to do: create a clinic, create a place, and help incurable people. So he took that road, that path, and and I think it's important for people to understand those contexts. I mean, I'm a big history person, or recommending folks to study history, the history of different ideas and theories and people and context, cultural context, and that kind of stuff. And that's something that I think is important. Because another thing I'd say about Morse, which I wrote in Spira Speaks and a couple other places, talked about, where I use Ehret and Dr. Morse as examples of the importance of transition by kind of examining some of their own their own problems that they had, that as in Ehret's case, he was developing transition. In Morris's case, I think some of this particular story had happened before he actually read the mucusless diet. I think he had only read Hotima, and he was kind of into the fruitarian concept, but he hadn't been exposed to the transition diet yet, I think. From what I remember, the story where, and I don't know if you've heard this, where he had, I think he had eaten mostly fruit for 2 months, that when he was in Florida on that
Orange farm.
The orange farm and orchards and all that kind of stuff. But then he said that he was traveling, and out of nowhere he just got this craving, and he ended up breaking this fasting period with eating some fish, and then got deathly ill. And so, but he just was laying there. He's all right, just give me some orange juice. I'm just gonna, don't mind me. I'm gonna lay here, and just my body's gonna have to pass this stuff. But I look at that, and as well as Ehret's, a couple of his stories where he had did a long period being mucus free and fasting, and then got back into some meat and that kind of stuff. And it's good. We got a good experiment out of it.
Yeah.
But my point is that when you transition properly, you get to a point where it is literally impossible for you to do
Yeah.
that, you know, where you just, that would be the same as just you drinking bleach. You know, you're not going to do it unless you are trying to commit suicide. You're not going to go eat some dead animal flesh, and there's no craving for it. You know, that's just, you're totally gone with that. And so that's where I look at those early stories of Morse, where I'm like, if he would have adhered to and known about the transition diet and applied that more, then, you know, then that would have changed the trajectory. Like that probably would not have happened, you know, because you'd have transitioned to a point where the craving for that would have been gone, you know, by the time you get to, because that's what I see when folks start doing these really long fruit periods and fasting periods without the transition. That tends, you know, that's like a recurring thing where they, instead of being able to smoothly break the fast, when I just did my first really long, I did like a 6-month long juice fast years ago. I did several of them in a row. I don't promote that, but I always transition, and I actually learned this watching, because this deviates from Ehret a little bit, but it's for longer fasting. I transition out a long fast instead of just breaking. So Brother Ehret still breaks, so he'll fast for a year, and then he'll just have some solid food, and then soon after having a fruit, you know, usually break it with fruit. If he can get some good watermelon, he'll break it with some watermelon. But it doesn't take him too long to get to a salad and eating vegetables again.
Yeah.
I do a thing where if I'm a fast for a long period like that, I go through a period where the line between solid food and liquid food is blurred. You know, where I'm kind of, whether it's, you know, some smoothies or taking a bite of some fruit, but and chewing it up, you know, just you know, but real juicy fruit or something. It's just, and I'm monitoring it with my body. It's a certain feeling, because the real shift internally doesn't happen until I introduce vegetables. So whether I'm doing fruit juice or start getting on all, you know, just eating more of the all fruit, that kind of stuff, it's until I get the vegetables in there, it still feels like, you know, with the way the body feels when it's fasting. But yeah, I learned that watching, because the first time he did an 8.5 month juice fast, and I watched it, you know, I witnessed it. So it was one of those, it's not like I'm hearing about it. I'm seeing him every day as he's doing this. And so it was just like, wow, okay. But it was making sense to me. It was blowing everybody's mind. For me, I was seeing, I was like, yeah, I see, I get it. Like, I see what's going on. And, but then I'll never forget when he broke it, it was, cause I didn't think just personally, I mean, it's his, but just my observation, I was like, man, I don't know if he should break it. Like, I think he should keep going. And he broke it, and it was like all hell broke loose in terms of, like, just energetically with the way people were treated. Because before, it was kind of like being on a magic carpet ride. And I mean, he's literally waking up in boxes of lemons. People are dropping off boxes of lemons and on his doorstep, or somebody just get some money somehow. I mean, just basically everything he needed was taken care of when he was in this fasting state. And you know, people treat him really well, all this kind of stuff. And he broke that fast, and it messed up the whole vibration. And people we went out to play some music, and there was just weird things happening. There's this woman that got up behind him and was doing this weird dancing, and just this weird, and he had to kind of like push her away, and it just got strange. And so I learned a great lesson from that for my practice, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to transition off of longer fasting periods when I fast longer, which in itself is a discipline and a challenge, because that's why I tell people master short-term fasting way before you get to trying to do long-term fasting, because what I would rather see, or what impresses us more, is when you've gone a long period mucus-free. So when I broke so I'm more proud of being mucus-free for 9 months at that. This was as fast. I was on liquid for 6 months, but then I did another 3 months, 100% mucus-free. And that's what I'm most proud of, that part of just, I was mucus
Yeah.
free for 9 months, as opposed to, you know, yeah, the liquid period, that was cool. But, but it's so much harder to remain mucus free when you come off. It's easier if you're eating nothing but fruit and you're kind of in that groove. Once you bring the vegetables in, that's where it gets a little harder, because then the cravings for other stuff really are brought in with the vegetables. And but this is all, I call what we do an art form, the art of the transition.
It's the same with us. It's an art form of healing the body.
The art of naturopathy. And so so that's kind of what that, you know, getting into there, where you start to really, as you get these reference experiences, you really learn how the body and how your body, and then by extension how other people's bodies are functioning and eliminating and healing, and you just start to really understand these things, which to me is a big part of it, is to really understand, like you said earlier, from experience, you know, epistemological for experiential dynamic, to really understand how the body is functioning, you know, from a firsthand, as a you're the source, you're the case study where you really can you know, feel and articulate the experience.
And document it, like to document these things, because it's so important to have those self testimonials and client testimonials to as evidence, because this is evidence that something is consistently yielding the same or similar results. And there's nothing else on this planet that I've seen other than suppressing with pharmaceuticals that will consistently get a result. Like their method will consistently get a result, and you can see what that result is. And it's not that great. And I actually just wrote something down, because you made that point about earlier on with the transition system. And it's like, I have seen that in Morse's world, the herbs are like, it's more, the herbs is like the transition version of Morse's system, of that people that can, where's it going to go with it? It's like people can get really heavy into the fruit and they forget the transition, like you were saying. But it's like, if you, for example, for cravings in like the Morse world, it's like, well, if you had tackled the parasitic side at the get-go, which is what Morse recommends, you wouldn't run into that problem. And he would have experienced that, like when he came out of the woods. I believe he flew up north, it was cold, they had fish, he was like, felt like he was going to die. And it's like, yeah, don't do that. And if he had done if he'd known about herbs, if he'd known about, read Arnold Ehret's book, if he'd known this before and applied it, yeah, he probably wouldn't have been there. And I see people do fasting, like my brother's at a community down south in the Byron Bay region, and he did a 3-day grape diet with some people there. And I just said, yeah, just get ready for some heavy detox and cravings. Like, just prepare for this. A lot of people there didn't understand. They didn't know what an elimination is. And I use that term more so than a healing crisis, because the word crisis is like, the elimination is so true. It's like your body is getting this out. It's eliminating. And these people I think a few of them got a bit scared off, because they didn't have the knowledge. They didn't know what was going on. My brother couldn't, he got me into one of the groups, and I just said, yeah, guys, if you feel it's getting too much, just stop it. Just go and eat some cooked veggies. Like go back to the other fruits.
Well, and they probably weren't doing enemas, and that's where we would, you know, because that is one of Ehret's, which would be where it's unquestionable when you're fasting that it's, if you don't do enemas at any other time, then get them in while you're fasting, so you can keep that stuff moving. And so I already know they probably weren't doing that.
No, and I did say, because one of them, I even asked, I said, are you guys eliminating properly? And I think 5 of them, one person wrote, no, I haven't been to the bathroom in like 2 days. And the other guys liked it. And I just said, well, if you're not going to be taking any, I'm like, imagine you're not taking any GI tract herbs. I'm like, I said, I did say to my brother, you need to have like an enema kit on hand. And they're at this community, which they're probably not going to be comfortable doing that. And it's like, this is where about being smart of when you're going to do it, where you're going to do it. And I don't think Morse has much to say on during periods, because he's like you in the sense, and that we won't recommend long fasts. Like you're much better off being very good at doing a short-term fast and then getting the consistency under your belt and like good self development of that consistency and following that system, opposed to I'm just going to do 90 days and then getting that like done, and then you can actually work it because it's a system that you're working and it's an art form, like you said. And I think the reason why Morse doesn't talk about that is because something I think that is something I love about both worlds, and this is something I think if this is sort of the reason why I really wanted to have this conversation from the word go, is Morse, has never said like this is the Morse method or whatever, but he has alluded to, and I think in quite obvious terms, to essentially a mucusless way of life beyond that period of like, mate, you got to get your shit together. And then what he often uses a term like find balance or whatever, which is like have some steamed veggies, have some salads. Like if you're going to have something less ideal, have that with a salad. Like these things are Ehret principles, like through and through. Right. And so when you see that, and being someone who I just like look at things, I don't just, it astounds me sometimes how some graduates don't see that. And, we have a group, unfortunately, where if you say anything about anyone else, they'll try to flag you. And I'll say, well, actually, Morse is an open admirer, and he's a student of Ehret in a way. Like he is. Right. And it's like we're all students. And it's like, and he states these things. And I find it astounding that people miss that, and you get this very closed off approach. So, what I was going to say is,
and what group is that? Because I don't, that's something I don't know as much about the current community as I was really into it. It was like 7-8 years ago or 10 years ago where I really knew what was going on. And because that was the first fans of Dr. Morse support group. But then that I knew that was going to get out of hand, and that ended up getting shut down. But then a couple years later, they created a new fans, which I think is the one that still exists. Yeah. But now, are these other groups of people that are enrolled in the school, or are these other community groups that are kind of outside of that?
I think fans, from what I can tell, fans of Dr. Morse is run by one person who works with Morse, I'm pretty sure, but it's less. I think most members, I think it's got like nearly 50,000 members or something. I think it's mostly people that this join because they've watched his videos. So a lot of people share things on there, and the people make recommendations that are very confusing. And I think it's too big for the admins to control it enough anymore, because pretty much someone that's just watched a Morse video can join. And I think that's great, because if they go there and they find a practitioner who can help them. But then there's more specific groups that are like more practitioner oriented, that are smaller. I forget the name of it, but there's one that I find is just very dogmatic, because there's like recommendations that I've seen recommendations made from other people that aren't Morse related. And I think it's great, because if it works and you see results, it's like, why would we not? Like Morse openly says, find what works and promote it. Like we see that it's working, let's discuss it. Let's not shut it down and go, well, if Dr. Morse didn't explicitly state this exact thing, then you cannot utter it in this group. And that's what I dislike. That's why I'm doing my own thing. I'm like, I can't have this. I got to have my own database. I work with the Morse's team closely. I'm really close with them. So I've got that connection, and I'm like, I got to do this, because I can't. It drives me up the wall, to be honest, man. I can't get anywhere with that. And that's why I love I really want people to see the sense, like the rational sense in why you would use enemas, why you would use herbs, why you would not just overlook these great tools and just sort of half do the diet. And then, okay, well, I'm doing pretty good during the week. And then I'm just, and this is where I think why people do this is because it just sort of came to me the other day, is people love saying to themselves that they're doing their best. Like, I'm doing my best, I'm only human. No. From my experience, and in most cases, you do what you want. And most of the times, what you need is not what you want. And that's where, like, if you read Mucusless Diet Healing System, it's like, this is what you need when you're on death's door and you need to do a quick lane change and follow an extreme diet change with herbs, it's probably going to be really uncomfortable because you didn't have any time. You need this. This isn't what you want. This isn't what you want right now. I experience this with clients frequently, that like this one that had an inoperable tumor in her uterus, and they wanted to fully remove her reproductive organs, and now she doesn't need that. It's like, yeah, that was rough for her, but the alternative was not, unless she wanted to go down that road of full hysterectomy, she can do that, but she didn't want to. Then it's like, this is what you need, to do what you need to do, opposed to what you want. And this is where I think it sort of leads back around to that thing where you at the beginning were talking about sort of where Ehret came from, and then these hippie groups, nudist fruitarian community started, and now it's being diluted. And I think a good word that can be used as sort of perverted, it's being twisted, of like the diet is just out the window.
Right.
Like my brother met someone at this yoga retreat where I'm doing some talks next week actually at, and a lot of these meditative people are like really overweight, really unhealthy. They've got all the Western disease problems. But this one guy he met was like a 55, 60-year-old yogi, and he was like a mucusless / fruitarian eater, and he was like doing 1-arm push-ups and stuff. And my brother is quite new to this sort of thing, and he was just like, you know what? He's like a kid. He's got the energy of a child. He's not super serious. He's not lost in his ego. And these other people are, and they've got the same issues. And that speaks for itself too. Like that speaks wonders. And that's where, when I have people asking like, what sets this apart? What makes this different? It's like, okay, well, there's, this to extend upon like these communities, which is why I think we need more of this, is these testimonial communities. There's a few of them, but there's not enough. And I've got a lady I'm doing a chat with soon who got herself out of a wheelchair in, I think, 6 months. She's a little older than me. Awesome stuff. And got a full website, beautiful testimonial. And we need more of these, because people think these things are impossible. People think that their suffering is inevitable, that it's fate, or, like they'll still go to church and pray, and what if God will help me? And it's like that joke, where it's, that guy's on top of the house and he's been flooded. It's like, well, God has sent you the
healing system. Somebody knocked at the door, and a boat came, and then the helicopter came, and you said, no, my God will save me. And you drowned, and then you go and ask God, like, hey, why didn't you save me? It's like, well, I sent you somebody at the door, a boat, and a helicopter, and you didn't take it.
And you can replace that now with people that whine about their problems. It's like, I sent you Dr. Morse's videos. I gave you Professor Spira's Mucusless Diet book. I've given you all these resources, and the ball's in your court.
Right. Yeah. We can't do it for it. We can't do the animals for you, and we can't, we can't go buy the fruit and chop it up for you, or,
No. And that's the thing, is it's when you move fear, I think as well, that's one of the last things that was one of the first things we do to help people. Like, if you have a client that's just riddled with fear, like, what can I do to get them to not be in fear anymore? And this is where it, understanding just the most simple common sense terms of how the body works, how to remove stagnation, and then go after it and use a system and a systematic approach. And that's why I just see, because I incorporate what I've learned from Morse and what I've learned from, thanks to you and Ehret's work, that is gel. And the 2 clients that have followed that, like to the T, the ones with the big major problems, I've had other ones that are still ongoing that are more serious. But the hair regrowth and the inoperable tumor in like that amount of time with that blend is magic in my view. It's absolutely beautiful. And I think there's just been so much confusion and almost like disdain and like throwing rocks on the other side. I see people doing, and then of course there's the whole vanity side, which I just don't get, which is all about like just the physical vainness of, and I think as long as we're thinking in terms of the iPhone, like me, it's all embedded, like the Hyundai i30, everything's like subconsciously sort of like me. It's all about me. And I love how you started at the beginning with, this isn't just about you. And this is the bigger picture of humanity as a whole. And I think that's really fundamentally why Morse is 74, I think, next week or something. And he's still going. It's like, because it's like, this isn't just about you. This is about get your kids on this, get mothers and fathers, get yourself cleaned up, remove the stagnation, get on the Mucusless diet healing system. If you need the herbs, get on the herbs. You like do your periods of, and this is like why this all or nothing thing. I did periods where I was like, oh, I just got to do grapes, or I just got to do this, and then I've broken that fast with like, let's say tomatoes or cucumbers, and then the next day I'm like, oh, vegan burger. And then it's and like that was like 4 years ago, and it's like you completely had no knowledge, hadn't properly understood, hadn't gone over that, was the emotional side and so on was just huge. And this is just where it's so important in this day and age to navigate what I would call the dribble on internet and find what actually is like truthful and people that genuinely want to help you, and to navigate this AI world. Like I saw some AI generated videos the other day, which look shockingly real. And I think,
it's getting weird.
Oh man, like I hope they have a thing where you have to say it's AI, because if you can't do that, like it's going to be rough, because I could just see people being like, oh, well, you're AI generated or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to get weird. It's going to get weirder because that's on a trajectory. But what I see is more and more, there's going to be the separation of the folks that are trying to get into health and go down the natural path to whatever extent they can. And then we're going to see extremes in terms of the gluttony and the celebration of it, because when we see that on all the TV shows and, all that kind of stuff. So I definitely see it's going to be more of a split. And then we'll see who live, so we'll see who survives there, the survival of the fittest of that split, because that gluttony thing, and there's the carnivore people trying to live like their Neanderthalic ancestors and all that. Those are real fads, and they're not sustainable. Those folks die out. There's a handful of people that, if they got a little bit more Neanderthal in them, they do well for a few years, but that's not going to put humanity back together. That's like literally we got people trying to eat diets of their ancestors that were not only deceased, but went extinct. It's like, they're literally, they're talking about it as if it's this, like, my ancestors and we were cave people and this kind of stuff. Is like, that most of them are extinct, right? So okay. And even they ate, so they'll try to do the analysis of their stomachs and things, and even the ones that there's, depending on where they found them, some of them did eat mostly vegetables. You had your cannibal ones, and that's where I think some of these folks are the descendants of the cannibalistic Neanderthals. But yeah, I definitely see that separation is gonna get more and more distinct. Right now, it's still this mishmash, but it's gonna get real distinct, I think, in the coming years. And it's definitely gonna be that line in the sand where you're either on this side over here, trying to heal yourself and clean yourself up and be more cognizant and conscious of what you put in your body, or you're going to be over on the Liver King side. And that's a road to pain and suffering.
I find that world really interesting, because those guys, like I saw a video with that Liver King dude. I'd seen him before, but I didn't realize that was the guy. And they're doing videos about like protecting constitutional rights and all this, like keeping all, and I fully agree with that. But then the confusion on the other part I find so odd. It's so odd that they can be so profoundly confused about and mocking and making it full mockery of, and even like just we obviously get a lot of mockery in our world, like where if you eat raw foods or just fruits and vegetables, that you're like it's poisonous, and you know, this isn't made for you, but it's just meant to be just meat or just ruminant animals or whatever. I find that it's very interesting. And but what I have noticed since all of this, as you said, is the separation will happen. And I think I've already started to see it in some areas, because I think people are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they're sick and tired of having confusion. And the people that I have dealt with in my immediate community that come at lifestyle from a very confused angle, when I've asked them those questions of, hey, what species do you think you're closely matched to? Do you think your genetic match would make a difference with that on how you perceive the way you live? Oh, definitely carnivore. Do we match any carnivores at all? Oh, well, I've canines. It's like, yeah, but what about your anatomy and physiology? What about, do you look more like a monkey or do you look more like a lion? Oh, monkey. Okay, well, we also share, you know, and then
Yeah.
seeing that sort of cog turn in their mind of, damn, what I've actually justified makes zero sense. I know Morse has a big EV book coming out soon, just breaking down the species and in huge detail, which they're saying is going to just.
Nice.
I hope that brings some more light on our worlds, because
Yeah.
and I think they are. I see it lifting up because people are just, they've had enough of just not, have always been confused, like confused out of their mind, and it really, it's at the end of the day, it's quite simple. You know, once you understand the principles of these things, it's
Yeah,
like it
yeah.
becomes second nature.
There's a lot of conditioning that has to be undone. All that
Yeah,
marketing I was talking about, and the nutrition
yeah,
theories, and all this, the dependency on doctors, and you know, they had the whole history of degrading natural health and naturopathy, and you know, it's just, there's a lot to be undone there. But yeah, no, I got a video that I did years ago where it's basically got some tigers or lions or something that come out, and there's all this meat, you know, dead intestines and stuff, and they come out, and as they say, with, if you're a true carnivore, you go for the gut. And that's
yeah,
exactly what they did. They went, and what are they trying to do? They were trying to eat some of the unpartially digested vegetable matter that the
yeah,
animal was eating, that
yeah,
was in their intestines. So they didn't start eating its leg or first. It
yeah,
went for the intestines first, and it started eat. And then in the picture, there's this close up as it bites into the intestine, like the diarrhea kind of starts coming down the side, it's all in their mouth, you know. And that's where I'm like, now if you're a carnivore, that should make you hungry, like that should make you like,
you should be salivating.
you know. But I've yet to find even a carnivore that is excited about that wants to go eat the intestines and the feces. But you know, we're ridiculous, man. This human, some of these different human directions and trajectories and tangents is just silly. But
Yeah.
you know, yeah, we, like I say, we got a lot of work to do.
No, we do. We do. But and I think that people are desperate for that, because they're seeing that what they've been doing has just been a dead end continually. And
Right.
we've history that speaks for that. As you said, it's like we should really call the diet that these other people are following a like I'm eating the extinct diet.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I'm eating a diet that a species that's now extinct used to eat. But like,
Right.
it's what we should be doing. It's mind boggling. But this is where, like, I love. Like you talked about this a few times with Brother Air on your podcast, which I really like. And it's like the importance of the breath, and how it's really the fundamental element or piece of physical creation that is everywhere, that needs to, it's the last thing that we draw in before we die.
Right.
And as you know, and yet I just see, if we're always focused on diet so much, how are we going to get beyond to these other levels? You know, you don't see cows and other animals like hanging out, one of them up a tree eating bark, one of the cows trying to chase something to eat the animal. Like,
Right.
you don't see these other species confused. And it's like, I just see a time where, you know, with this generational change, where when we can be at a point where the thought of diet isn't even a discussion, because the species themselves are so clean that we're living how we're meant to be living, then that next change, the change that we experience through, I would say, fasting is when you experience this the most, when you experience a much deeper connection to whatever is connecting everything together, that this calmness, this higher, like it's almost like a high feeling in a way, a very present feeling that can be overwhelming at times. That's why Morse says, like, can we handle fruitarianism even if we got there at this current state of energy of the planet? And it's like something has to give, something has to shift, because there's too much other conflicting energy going on that is prohibiting anything like that from being the default, this the current way that the world is. And I think that once, because people often go to the diet and they stop, you know, and then they just sort of end, and it's like, hey, that's it. But it's like, what about when you get cleaner and cleaner, that you, as you said, you've gone and done, not that you promote them and not that I promote or Dr. Morse promotes long extended fasting, but we do know that the cleaner you get, your body will tell you, I don't want to eat right now. And then you, next thing you know, that you've gone a long period of time without consuming food, solid food, whether you're on a water fast or juice or whatever. And then you start to see really see the importance of breath, sunlight, and these things that most people aren't even aware of in this day and age. And I think, you know, it's in Professor Spira, it's there in the name, you know, Spira, like, you know, respiration. Yeah, maybe if we just round off with that, with the importance of really, like, maybe what the levels beyond just physically changing the diet are, like what that could look like, and what you've experienced perhaps of beyond just, okay, well, it's just food, you know?
Yeah. So I mean, that's like that's like a whole other episode. We get into
probably
get into the deep waters, but as far as breath, I mean, that's everything, because we get off into all these different things, but until you come back to breath, that fundamental, it's all here. Because as soon as that breath is gone, this whole thing is over for you. You know, this whole experience. Now, just as any other, just as, you know, the transitional principles, we can use the transition with food, and we can use it with other things in our life and sleep and all kinds of stuff. You can also use that for breath. And you get people that really start to practice breath work at a high level, and it doesn't have to be real technical or wooey or something, but just think logically. It's like, okay, well, you get to where if you practice this for 20 minutes a day or 10 or something, but you just breathe twice a minute, then maybe breathe once a minute, breathe once every 2 minutes, you know, see like what's the limit, you know, where can you get, what's the smallest the number of breaths that you need. And like Brother Ehret always says, the less you breathe, in terms, like the less breaths that you have to take, the longer your life is. You're extending your life. Because look at some of these animals, like a dog, they call it dog years. You know, what do? They pant, their breath is really quick. A lot of these cats, you know, these animals, their breath, it's not as long as ours. And so that's the marriage of the mucusless diet healing system with the science of breath. You put that together, now you're just taking things to a whole different level. So we're still talking, physiologically, just because I could, just really think about that. And if you start to experiment with that, and just, okay, I'm gonna do one long breath in, and I'll hold it for a minute, and take a long breath out. And how long can you hold a breath out, with the oxygen totally out of your lungs? And, how long can you sit there and then control it? So you're not like where you do an out breath and then, where you feel like where you actually learn how to control bringing it back in and holding it. And, of course I play a, trombone, breath instrument. So, so that wind instrument, so that, I get to practice breath work every time I play. But, so that's one thing to think about there. And then in terms of higher physiological states, I coined this concept, physiological enlightenment, and being on the path to physiological enlightenment, because I'll have these debates sometimes with folks that are so into the mental, and they say, well, it's all just about the mental, and you can do all this stuff with mental. You don't have to really worry about diet. And then I always kind of tell them, well, if it really was just all about the mind and our minds were really that powerful, then you could take a baby and instruct that baby to use its mind to unfold itself in 2 weeks, unfold and become an adult in 2 weeks. I don't know any mind strong enough to do that. There's laws and principles at play. This baby has to unfold over a certain period of time. Now that period of time can shift and be a little slower or longer based on what it's eating and how it's living, but some kind of extreme thing is not going to be able to happen just with the mind. And so, the rational fasting, it says for transformation of body, mind, and spirit, that it's the holistic, seeing it all connected and together. Because then sometimes they'll be like, well, talk about spirit and spirituality and this kind of stuff. And I'm saying the whole concept of holistic is it's all connected. So when you're eating, and that's going to affect how you think, the clarity of your mind, your value system, change your cultural surroundings, your desires, what you want out of life. That's going to change. But then that affects your spiritual life and your consciousness and your ability to download frequencies and information from the universe or the cosmos or God or whatever terminology you use. And so to me, that becomes a first step in any spiritual, and that's just a personal opinion, but anybody that wants to elevate themselves on a spiritual level, this has to be a cornerstone, because we've met with so many folks that would be gurus in their respective spiritual field, but their diets are horrible.
Yeah, it's a lot of them.
So what they say sounds good to people, and they're like, man, that sounds really good, and they can be an orator and people will listen to it. But to me, a lot of that is sophistry, is modern day sophistry. People are old sophists of old, where people, it sounds good, but and for whatever way we're wired, we can get really high off of some of these concepts. And so that's where I tend to not talk as much about it, and it's about live it and be it. Because all of those different experiences that a lot of these people have talked about, and the out of body things and the travels, like I've done all those things. But one of the things that I realized along those travels was that for us, or at least for me, it's about how comfortable can you be in your body, because this desire to constantly want to leave the body generally is from people that are not comfortable in their body. It feels better to be elsewhere. And so for me, like I've been all kinds of places, and and I'm just as comfortable here, going off in the woods, going to a mall. Like I don't have to be, in some kind of sacred it's like wherever I am is that sacred place, and you bring that with you. And so I think we're actually doing this comfortable in your body challenge. A lot of people aren't going to get it, I don't think, but that's kind of the idea, because people like to talk so much about they're going out into their out of bodies and they're doing this and all this kind of stuff. And we're saying, who is having a human experience in their body to where you feel so good, you don't want to go anywhere. There's nothing, you know that you already are that. So you don't get to a point where you don't have to go there, because you already know it.
You're already there, man.
Yeah, you're already there. And so it's like, let's let's explore where we're at and really try to master this little realm that we find ourselves in here, and then go on this journey of physiological transformation to really see, what are we? That's one of the things that's more controversial for some people at Ehret, where he talks about the reason for skin color, his opinion on the reason. And a lot of us that go down this path, we agree with him because we see what he's saying.
Exactly. It's not that we just blatantly believe in him. We see that it is.
Yeah.
And
so that's what I'm interested in, trying to really get as clean as I can. And of course, and then have some children, and let's get the blood legacy, try to keep changing the blood, cleaning the blood, and really see what we can become as a species, as humans. I'm interested in, when you do get into some of the old ancient mythological stories and books and stuff, and they'll talk about bioluminescent beings that had this radiation that was so intense that humans in our state couldn't handle being too close to these figures. So that's the energetics I'm interested in. I'm the energetics of clean blood, totally clean blood. What's the potential of our iron? If we start to transmute elements in the blood to the point where we can actually get back to that point, the bioluminescent human beings, that's interesting to me. So that's the kind of stuff that I kind of look at when you start looking at the where could fasting lead, where could these things lead, because that is a whole area of study, but we get into it from the perspective of Mucusless diet healing system and some of these other principles. So we're looking at things like or if they, different stories will talk about folks that are levitating or walking on water, or figures that had been alive for tens of thousands of years, and all these things. We find that there are explanations for the possibility of those things within the context of mucus-free consciousness and mucus-free understanding. That you can explain a being, even with some of the physics, some of these theories that they have in physics, you start getting into they have a whole concept of the black body. I mean, that's in a physics and chemistry book. Like, we didn't when somebody made up, that was just an observation that scientists made of of basic physics. You take a black basketball, put it in the sun, and it's the greatest absorber and simultaneously a greatest absorber and emitter of energy. As you put your hand on that dark ball, it's going to be hotter than a lighter ball will disperse the sun. It's not going to absorb it in the same way. So that's where you get into Ehret talking about sunbathing and the transformation of the skin and that kind of stuff. And now you're back to change of the physiology. And so those are the things that really interest me. We talk about, you can get into talking about the hair and the idea of locks as antennas for the cosmos and the universe and the original. You go back and the stories of folks who would there was whole cultures that if they would dominate a people, they force them to cut their hair, and the Samson, and there's a whole legacy. And Ehret it's like, what I like about Ehret, he touches on these things and then he kind of moves to the next, but he touches on these huge ideas and philosophies that we can then follow up on and really investigate and see, okay, well, that's interesting. Where you start getting really into that. And so then all those different principles from the hair, you start looking at cultural, like, well, why am I shaving? Why would I shave my head? Why would I, it's like, is that because I feel like doing that from inside, or is it some kind of cultural influence, or is it something that somebody forced? Because when you join a gang or you join the army or something like that, or go to prison, there might be something in there where they're gonna first thing they do is shave your head. You know, and these are, you know, domination principles. It's the other side of humanity, the pus and mucus based side. And
it's so is. I just wanted to say something because I've been on the fence with that, because I've pretty much had long, like just long hair for majority of my young adult life, and then whenever I felt more of these physical forces pulling me, I always felt that in conjunction with I got to get a haircut. Because I'd see other people, men or whatever, looking a certain way, and I remember when I did that, and since I've had short hair, I've felt this odd disconnect that I used to just default have with more of what naturally was around me. And I remember discovering that guy, you probably know him, Ra of Earth. He's on, he often like puts his hair up and talks about like during the day, it can like pull down. And then when you take it down at night, the energy flows down through your body. And he talks about like the importance of like, you know, dreadlocks and then the color of the skin. And we saw with Ehret, you know, when he went and sunbathed for ages and he was in those like, a hot bathhouse or whatever, they thought he was like indigenous, even though he was from there, and how that changes. And the same way with when you're not always in the sun, you know, you're going to probably burn. But when you start to go in the sun more, and we've already seen in modern science, they say if we stop like intercultural mingling and we just cut off trade and moving, every country that's in the tropics will eventually become black again. Like just generationally. And we see the influence of just by living in a warm, sunny place
we would say with that though, that's still, it's still more diet. My observation is it's still more diet than it is location, because
for sure.
Because you can take people, and we've seen even with you know, if you one of the example people like to say, I mean, when you really start to look at this, you can see how all these different people who their ancestors were way darker, and all we have is photographs taken in the late 1800s. But you can compare, if you look at whether you're talking Asia, you can talk Eskimos or native people in Alaska, you know, Russia. I mean, you can go all around the world, and if you look at pictures from the late 1800s, those folks, when they first sort of, you know, noticed this wider Western civilization, generally are shades and shades darker than their progeny now, you know, their bloodline now. And so that's, but when you combine both of them, combine diet and get into some sun, into a closer to the equator, now that's just a recipe for for success, you know.
But you see that, like we said, with the dominance, like you look at hair, when it grows, it's like it's free, it's just freely. But then you see the domination, like in the military, or because before you said that about the military, I was thinking, well, I can already think of a few places, military and prison, which you just later pointed out, is like, that's immediate control and domination. Of like, zoop, not straight off. And it's like, it's almost like in a subconscious, in a non-obvious way to most people, they'll see that, oh, okay, well, whatever. But it's like, you've got a uniformity, you've got everyone looking the same, and you've got this cutting off of what is meant to be, in a sense. It's like, it's not meant to be cut and shaped. And I think you see that as well with like the female hygiene world. You see that with, you know, all the shaving and all that. It's everywhere. And it's funny
and it's even now the plastic surgery. I mean, that's gotten normalized in the past 10 years. I didn't even, until like was talking to some people, and they were like, no, you need to like look at this. Is everybody has it in certain places in the West Coast in the United States, and Miami and different places where people are getting butt implants. They're going to the you know, sunbathing pods and every day, and getting plastic surgeries and Botox, and just, it's like, Man, like
Yeah,
that's the wrong direction.
it's really sad, man, because it was just yesterday, no, the day before, where my partner and I were at the beach and I saw someone about our age, sort of late 20s, and she had a lot of Botox done. And I just
Mm,
thought, like, oh, if only you knew what you were doing. Like, there's so much asleepness and unawareness that is just penetrates like every aspect of the Western world that we live in. Same thing with like TVs and this sort of thing. And it's, man, when you see that it comes into the younger generation, I always grew up where thinking that that was something that only celebrities did because they were
right.
like maybe not very
Yeah,
happy
which
to be
which
having
it
all this
used to
attention.
be. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
mostly, yeah, celebrities, and it would be a little, a little bit, except for there was those couple that where it got out of hand. But yeah, back in the 80s, it was just it didn't wasn't crazy yet. And
Mm.
then now it's just really, but then it goes back earlier. We were talking about the self-esteem issues and just a lot of these, the mental illness that comes with eating pus and mucus forming foods. Because
Mm.
that's another one of those things that we really harp on, the way that eating these foods affects behavior. And that's a hard pill for people to swallow, because they're like, well, I eat this way and my parents eat that way, and I'm not a murderer, I'm not a rapist. I'm just like, well, I'm not saying you are, but what I'm saying is that drug operates differently in different people, because not
Mm.
everybody that drinks alcohol is an angry drunk, or a rape, they're a rapist, want to be
Mm.
drunk, or
Mm.
somebody that, not every, some people just want to go to sleep, they drink, and so not everybody's going to eat meat and go shoot up a school,
Mm.
but a percentage is.
Mm.
You're not going to see any fruits and green leafy vegetable eaters that have been eating it for a period of time and actually transition properly. As
Yeah.
I have to make that disclaimer, because I don't want
Yeah.
some that, because at some point, one of these fruitarian people that where they tried to eat nothing but fruit for a couple months, and they're going to lose their mind and go do something stupid. And everybody's going to be like, see, that fruitarian, that doesn't work. They're crazy. And it's
Mm.
like, that doesn't count. We're talking about people that have been doing what we're talking about for years. You're not going to see that. That's
Mm.
just that type of behavior is not it's just not what it's just not what we do. We don't want to be around that
No.
environment. We're not stimulated to. That's not exciting, and that's definitely a firsthand experience that I went through with my transformation when I went from where I was before starting the
Mm.
diet, where I enjoyed that environment. I enjoyed being around, we'd be in a group of friends, we'd go pick a fight or get into fights with people, and just the drama that unfolds, like, that's exciting. And but as soon as I changed my diet and started cleaning myself up, my whole value system changed, and my desire for just to be around that changed and went away. Like, that wasn't fun anymore.
Mm.
Going to the club and getting drunk and picking fights and going, it's like, that just wasn't fun anymore. And so, and it
Yeah.
wasn't philosophy. It wasn't that I read because some people, they want to try to do it that way, where it's this moral. They read some book or a religious concept or something, and they want to try to, I'm gonna be a better person morally, and I'm there's some dogmatic kind of thing. And it's like that. I don't recommend doing that, because
No.
you want it to be natural, where you feel it. You just like, I do not like this anymore. This is not
Mm.
fun. What's more fun is going to the library, getting some books,
Yeah.
things that the pus and mucus folks would think is boring, but that becomes exciting to us.
Yeah.
But
Um,
playing music, making art, that kind of stuff, being productive.
yeah. Well, luckily for me, just like you, like I've been a musician for like since I was little. Like played guitar, taught myself guitar from a very early age, and it's behind me there. And I've got a flute that I don't play at home because the neighbors will get irritated. But
Mm,
when I go out in nature, I'll play it. And it's these things. They're other great tools as well, like to help like move energy as well. Music can be like a destruction of
mm,
energy. Like I was huge into like death metal music through my dark teenage years, and that just you think suicidal, you think very dark. It's not nice, and then seeing the opposite of that, like just that contrast. For example, what you were saying is if someone's done it properly, you're not going to see someone eating green leafy vegetables and fruits going on a murder spree that has gone through it properly, that doesn't have some imbalance somewhere that could be addressed by the change of your diet properly.
Right.
This is why, like the future, imagine like rehab centers that are based on the Mucusless system with
definitely
Morse herbs. Like, man, like the possibility is unreal. That's seen just already what parts of India have done. Like a few years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, I did a meditation course called Vipassana, which is like a silent meditation retreat. It's what the original Buddhist monks did, and it's 10-day silent meditation, and it was really difficult, like especially the first few days. You're not talking, it's very weird not using your vocal cords, and then at the end when you're closing it off so you can like be okay back in normal society, they give you some examples of showing where eating, I think for them it was just like Hare Krishna vegetarian food, but there was no animal flesh there at all. It was all like, you know, fruits, salads, and like lentil curry and rice. And I think that was pretty much the extent of it. And they showed these places in India where they had like the worst like rapists and like violent murderers, and these people that just had done like awful things and were really not well people at all. And they started doing Vipassana and eating this vegetarian food, and they never did it. They were just like wanted to repent. A lot of them initially didn't want to change, but because they were in this prison where they were forced to do this, they had no choice. And they eventually came to terms with what they did, were actually sorry for what they did. And when they were questioned, oh, well, you can't use this as a way to say you're going to cure a murderer or a rapist. The Cuenca, the teacher, brilliant, he's dead now, but he's the guy that brought it from the east to the west. He said, all right, we won't make those claims. But what we can say is that these murderers, ex-murderers and rapists never did that again until they died. And a lot of them went into voluntary service where they were around people where they could have done those things, and they didn't. So he's like, even if that was just pretending, which they weren't, if you had that same urge, you would have done that. And seeing that drastic shift, and now I know in parts of Nepal, like meditation in primary school is like part of the curriculum, and not eating animals is part of the curriculum, and like these amazing changes. And when I like heard that and witnessed it, I was like, oh my God. And I've discovered
is this documented or written down somewhere, or you learned this from being there in person?
I believe it is, because Cuenca, who brought, I think it's called Dharma Razmi, is so any way you do a Vipassana course on the planet will be identical. The lessons are all by, his name's Cuenca. It's I'll send it to you, but Gonka, I believe, Goenka, something like that. He used to be a massive like businessman, multimillionaire, like just crushed people with his business. Then something happened, and then he needed to change what he did, and then he brought the meditation over. But seeing that shift was like, oh my God, like amazing. And that, if anyone can get anything from that, it's seeing that like, don't see anything as like a loss, like a complete loss. We live in this world now where it's like, oh, you're incurable, or there's something wrong. Something's gone wrong in that individual. And like, how can we help that individual in a safe environment? Of course, like if they're going to hurt others or hurt themselves, we need to do that. That's
real habilitation. That's real habilitation, and it's very possible and very real, and those kind of examples. But it's like those examples are, for whatever reason, they're suppressed, or they're hidden, or they're sort of, they're more esoteric, where you like you say you found them in a place where that's a little more esoteric. But that's the kind of stuff we talk about all the time, where those case studies are there and those examples are there, but there's definitely a lot of resistance for the general public to really want to make that connection between behavior and all of the ills of society, the unnecessary pain and suffering and war and all this stuff. There's a reason for all of it, and the foundation is eating the wrong foods. And doesn't sound like, well, that's got to be something else, or it's this or that. Or it's like, well, I mean, even for people that are into their mythologies or their Bibles or whatever, what was the first problem? not eating properly. You know, in a lot of traditions, they have the not eating something properly is part of the problem. And so yeah, so that's cool. Yeah, you have to send me that. I'd like to see if
I will, because people always go to the effect and they miss the cause. It's like, no, pull back. Where did it start? Where did it originate from? And I see the same with like my experience in society with, you know, I think tattoos is another huge one. I dipped into that in my early 20s, and now what I know now, I'm like, oh man, like I know what it's doing to my body. Thank God they're only small, but I see people like Morse had a case where, you know, I've been juggling up. Like someone asked, would it be worth lasering a tattoo and then letting your body heal the burn from the laser versus leaving the ink in your body? And Morse essentially, his opinion was, I'd rather get rid of it because your body can deal with any sort of burn if you give it the opportunity, opposed to having a poison sitting around your blood and in your limb system your entire life. And he had a client, he was full body tattooed, and she died after having a full body like tattooed. And like that's one of his stories where
she died. Well, she didn't have it removed. She
was almost full body tattooed, and after I think after a third or a quarter of her body was tattooed, she started to have like spasms and stuff. And then they went over to Morse, and during the time working with her, she was still getting tattoos because I was working with the family, and she died. And that is really sad stuff. And I see that everywhere, like the body modifications. And anyway, we could obviously go down, but there's so much. But yeah, I think to round off here, like any last words, Spira, before signing off? Or
nah, man, just appreciate you. This was fun. Talking and encourage if anybody wants to find me. I'm mucuslesslife.com.
Where can I find you?
Prof.Spira on Instagram. Professor Spira, Mucus Free Life LLC on YouTube. And you can look up the annotated, revised, and edited Mucusless diet. And we do 7 different books on
I'll link them. I'll link them all as well on my upload too. I have them all in there.
And so come and we have community. We're working on developing our mucus free community. We have meetups every Wednesday, free meetups, and we've been developing a book club and have our own private social platform that we've been developing. And so just trying to create opportunities for us to come together and to support each other, and where there's just a good vibe. We don't got that weird, some of those weird vibes and all that arguing and that kind of stuff. It's just that's not the vibe. We like to have a nice, peaceful environment. And so I invite folks to check us out, connect.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, mate, one of these days I'm going to get over to America, hopefully visit. My aim will be to visit you guys and visit Morse, because it's like there's a few cool things going on in Australia. We have a good, like, I'm hoping to hopefully get some sort of like actual practice opened.
What part of Australia are you in?
So I'm on the East Coast, which is the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. So if you look at Australia on the map, it's sort of the mid-east side. And then on the west side, down south, there's a clinic that like stocks all of Morse's herbs, and Ben runs that. He used to be like a champion bodybuilder in Australia, and then he fully saw the negative result of that and went down like killing himself. So I'm working with him and those guys. But like there's more coming over here, which is cool. And I really want to help the immediate people around here, because Australia is just like America. We're just as fat and overweight and sick. I think we're in the top 2, virtually the same countries, more or less, in terms of how people are. But the benefit here is I think the quality of fruit virtually everywhere is seriously high, which is a massive. Like we have some of the greatest like wine is, so grapes are everywhere. Currently grape season. You can get 30 Australian dollars for an 11 kilogram box, which probably that would be maybe like $20 US for, I don't know, a massive box.
A big case.
Big case, like a case of great, like black, good quality grapes. But yeah, man, I really appreciate this. I'm sure people are going to get tons of value. Like, man, I'm really thankful for your time, and much appreciated. We're literally just hit the 3,333, which is awesome. So yeah, guys, you can of course find Spira with all the links down below. I'll put all the stuff there. I'll link the 2 main books as well in separate links, so you guys can get them. They're on Amazon. Absolute game changers of Spira's work that he's done from Arnold Ehret. And of course, you guys will find me at rawgenerate.com, and all my socials and all that will be there as well. And always feel free to reach out for a chat for either of us, because we want to help people and get connected with people that actually want to get well, that don't just want to talk it, they want to walk it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, well, much love, man, and much love, guys. Thank you so much for listening and watching.
Peace, love, and breath.
Yeah.